Mirdita, hello, welcome, everybody. I am very happy to officially declare open the 7th edition of Tirana Connectivity Forum. We have started in 12:15. Now it's 7:21. I think we have done a good path together. Here, I am honored to welcome His Excellency, Prime Minister of Albania, Mr. Edi Rama, to provide the keynote address of the Tirana Connectivity Forum, right immediately after the European Union Western Balkans Summit in Slovenia. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you, and greetings to everyone that is following us from distance. I see Knut Finkelstein, who is occupying all the screen after a victory
që në fakt kishtazën të gjithë ekranin pas fitores në zgjedhjet e fundit në Gjermani, edhe pse nuk e kanë ende përcaktuar qeverinë, por ju bëj thirrje të gjitha palëve që të jenë konstruktive, ashtu siç në fakt ju thonin kur vini në Shqipëri. Jam shumë i kënaqur që të gjendem sot këtu. Ashtu siç prezantuesi tha, vetëm një ditë pas summitit midis BE-s dhe Ballkanit Perëndimor në Brdo, ku patëm mundësinë të ndanim me 27 vendet anëtare dhe 5 bashkëudhëtarët në Ballkanin Perëndimor. Mendimet tona lidhur me situatën aktuale dhe sigurisht jo vetëm lidhur me zgjerimin, por në përgjithësi për sfidat që po bëhen gjithmonë më tepër të ndërlidhura. Mendoj që po bëhet gjithmonë e më e qartë se zgjerimi është për herë e më pak një fjalë që përdoret me pasionin dhe vullnetin me të cilin përdorej vite më parë. Dhe nuk ka dyshim që procesi mund të kërkojë kohë, shumë kohë. Në të njëjtën kohë është shumë e qartë për të gjithë se Ballkani Perëndimor është një realitet gjithmonë më tepër i rëndësishëm për BE-n. Dhe mendoj se kjo është po kështu një arsye sepse disa prej vendeve skeptike tashmë duket se janë shumë më të hapura ndaj idesë për të nxitur sa më shumë të munden të nxitin brenda afatit të shkurtër që ka mbetur në trysnipra nga të gjitha anët e Bashkimit Evropian për shkak të populizmit, të së djathtës ekstreme e lëvizjeve të tjera të ngjashme. Të tilla lëvizje nuk qeverisin në asnjë prej këtyre vendeve, por është e qartë që ato ndikojnë dhe ndikojnë shumë qeveritë e mëteruara në Bashkimin Evropian. Sigurisht, kjo ndodh për shkak të arsyeve zgjedhore kryesisht. Dhe me qëra fjala, gjatë diskutimeve, ju thash që kam mësuar një teknik të re për të zbuluar zhvillimet e së ardhmes afërt duke parë kalendarin e zgjedhjeve në të njëjtin afat kohor. Kështu që u sugjeroj të gjithëve që nëse se doni të dini pak a shumë llojin e qëndrimit të disa vendeve të rëndësishme, shihni kalendarin e tyre zgjedhor dhe do ta kuptoni. Ka një harmoni mjaft të madhe midis nevojave për të shkuar tek votuesit dhe tonin karshi procesit të zgjarimit dhe procesit tonë të integrimit. Thënë e gjithë kjo, ndërgjegjësimi dhe vetëdia që ndjej është gjithmonë e më e lartë për rëndësinë që Ballkani Perëndimor ka, së pari për arsye gjeopolitike dhe së dyti për vetë arsyen për të mbrojtur Evropën nga migracioni i paligjshëm të parë mbi të gjitha. Po sjell për herë e më shpesh në tryezë bindjen e përbashkët se Ballkani Perëndimor duhet të mbështetet më tej, të ndihmohet më shumë e të shoqërohet më shumë në procesin e transformimit. Një prej instrumenteve të rëndësishme që Bashkimi Evropian dhe Komisioni Evropian kanë identifikuar si një motor për të shtyrë makinerinë e transformimit përpara në Ballkan është i ashtu quajturi plan ekonomik dhe investimeve që është mjaft ambicioz krahasuar me atë çka kemi pasur deri tani. Shumë sfidues, sigurisht, pasi lidhet me një vlerë mjaft të konsiderueshme parash dhe lidhet sigurisht me kapacitetet jo vetëm për të parashikuar, por edhe për të punuar së bashku për projekte të cilat më pas do të financohen në funksion të më shumë ndërlidhjeje. Dhe në infrastrukturë, rrugë, hekuruda, ndërlidhja në fushën digjitale dhe ndërlidhja në rrjetet energjetike. Kështu që jemi një farsoj të qartë për situatën dhe duam të bëjmë më të mirën nga kjo situatë, siç u thash edhe dje, në qoftë se Bashkimi Evropian nuk mund të mbaj shpejt fjalën për zgjerimin dhe në qoftë se Ballkani Perëndimor nuk bashkohet dot me Bashkimin Evropian, atëherë objektivi i Bashkimit Evropian duhet jetë të ecë drejt Ballkanit Perëndimor nëpërmjet një mënyre më të qëndrueshme e më të njëtrajtshme nëpërmjet veprimeve të përbashkëta. Dhe këto veprimet përbashkëta janë të dy llojeve. Të para, veprime të përbashkëta për të përballur krizat e përbashkëta me shpresë pa përsëritur nisjen dramatike të përgjigjes ndaj pandemisë, ku Ballkani Perëndimor u la tërësisht më njanë nga skema e shpërndarjes së vaksinave. Kriza energjetike, e cila po godet fort shumë vende në Bashkimin Evropian dhe në thelb ata që janë apo varen nga burimet e gazit. Ashtu siç Evropa, si e tërë, të gjithë e dim mirë, varet në rreth 95% të saj tek gazi që nuk prodhohet brenda Evropës, por që vjen në Evropë përmes destinacioneve të tjera. Harta e ndërlidhjes është e qartë, është hartuar që shprej disa kohësh tashmë. Financimi dhe proceset operative për zbatimin e asaj për të cilën është rënë dakord lidhur me këtë hartë është sfida. Është një sfidë mjaft e madhe. Unë vazhdoj të këmbëngull se përmes Ballkanit të hapur ne do të kemi një mekanizëm shtesë më efikas për të nxitur saktësisht kapacitetet që ne kemi për të bërë më shumë në këtë drejtim. Investimet në ndërlidhje kombinuar me përpjekjet e përbashkëta për të bërë rajonin ton një rajon pa bariera sa më shpejt të jetë e mundur sa u takon barierave jo tarifore, është gjëja e duhur për të bërë dhe është rruga e duhur për të ecur përpara. Ka diskutime mjaft konfuze për procesin e Berlinit, për Ballkanin e hapur, ndërkohë që për mua është shumë e qartë. Ballkani i hapur është frymzuar nga procesi i Berlinit. Është një zhvillim i natyrshëm i procesit të Berlinit. Është një instrument i krijuar në rajon për të vendosur të gjitha përpjekjet në rajonin për të zbatuar parimet dhe objektivat e vetë procesit të Berlinit, ndërkohë që procesi i Berlinit i vetëm është e qartë që ka një problem. Problemi është që autorësia është jashtë Ballkanit, çka nuk kupton që pavarësisht vullnetit të mirë, cili do nga jashtë që është angazhuar me procesin e Berlinit, ka objektivisht shumë më tepër gjëra për të marrë në jetën e vetë përditshme dhe nuk mund të përqendrohet vetëm tek Ballkani. Çka ne mundemi dhe duhet ta bëjmë. Pra, praktikisht është njësoj si një njësi zbatimi projekti. Pra, donatorët marrin pjesë me financim dhe shoqërohet nga projekte, por kanë gjithmonë nevojë për njësinë e zbatimit projektit në vend me qëllim që të merren pikërisht me zbatimin. Pra, Ballkani i hapur është njësia e zbatimit të procesit të Berlinit, shumë e thjeshtë. Është gjithëpërfshirës ashtu siç është dhe procesi i Berlinit, është natyrisht i hapur për përmirësime, është absolutisht as pak nuk është një proces i cili ikon apo e trazon këtë proces, por është një proces i cili kërkon zbatimin e të 4 lirive. Pasi, leta themi, ne mund të kemi infrastrukturën më të mirë, por në qoftë se nuk kemi një qarkullim tjetër, nuk maksimizojmë atë çka investojmë financiarisht. Dhe nga ana tjetër, ajo çfarë investojmë financiarisht për shkak të natyrës së këtij plani është gjithmonë e varur nga kapacitetet dhe nga performanca e më shumë se sa një vendi. Pasi çdo rrugë, çdo segment rrugor, çdo segment hekurudor, çdo segment digital, apo çfarë do lloj gjëje që ne të bëjmë në një rrjet të ndërlidhur të energjisë, nuk mund të ndërtohet në mënyrë të fragmentarizuar dhe nuk mund të ndahet nga tjetri. Në qoftë se ndërtojmë një rrugë apo hekurudh nga pika A në pikën B brenda vendit dhe nuk kemi ndërlidhjen me të njëjtin standard dhe me të njëjtin synim në kufi, nuk ka shumë kuptim. Për t'ju informuar, ne duam të ndisim përpara korridorin Adriatiko-Jonian dhe me qëra fjala jemi aktualisht të angazhuar në një ushtrim solo, ndërkohë që vitet kalojnë dhe projekti është larg se qenë i gati sa i takon përfshirjes së vendeve që presupozohet ta kenë këtë ndërlidhje, konkretisht Shqipëria, Malizi dhe Kroacia. Për të, ne jemi përgatitur shumë seriozisht e tërësisht për një investim i cili duhet që të siguroj financimin përmes kontratave të drejtë për drejta me rrugët që nuk kupton rrugët me pagesë. Pra, ideja është që na duhet që të kemi një zgjidhje, të ndërtojmë korridorin për të kemi një zgjidhje alternative për të gjithë. Pra, jo vetëm korridorin, por gjithashtu edhe alternativën për rrugët. Jemi tashmë më së fundi duke parë punën të filloj për hekurudhën Tiranë-Durrës, që ka qenë një proces i gjatë. Do të thoja as proces zakonisht i gjatë, por edhe më shumë se sa aq me Bergin për arsye që nuk kanë qenë të lehta për të kuptuar sa i përket moskundërshtimeve, megjithatë në fund gjërat janë në rregull dhe mund të fillojmë. Aktualisht na duhet që ta lidhim Durrësin me malin e Zi në kuptimin hekurudhor, sepse në të kundërt atëherë nuk ka kuptim. Në të kundërt, lidhja e Durrësit me Hanin e Hotit dhe pastaj nga Hani e Hotit me malin e Zi do të nxit tregtin. Paralelisht me këtë, ne jemi sigurisht të interesuar dhe presim me padurim që të punojmë edhe për hekurudhën tjetër, Durrës-Prishtinë. Dhe më pas të lidhet me nishin që sërish e sjell të gjithë investimin në një rrjet më të gjerë, jo vetëm rajonal, por edhe evropian. Dhe së treti, nuk po e vendos në tabelën e përparësive, por këto treja janë shumë të rëndësishme dhe duhet të nisin sa më shpejt të jetë e mundur. Pra tjetra është edhe segmenti midis Durrësit dhe Maqedonisë së Veriut, që sërish do të jetë kuptim plot për rajonin dhe do të jetë shumë i rëndësishëm paralelisht me punën që kemi nisur për portin e ri tregtar të qytetit të Durrësit, që sigurisht do të jetë më i madh, më i mirë dhe shumë më tepër dinjetos nga pikpamja mjedisore se sa infrastruktura katastrofike që kemi pasur, që kemi dhe që ende e quajmë port. Pra, kjo ishte sa u takon hekurudhave e rrugëve, ndërkohë që sigurisht Urojmë që të mund të shoqërojmë projektin e hekurudhës Durrës Maqedonia e Veriut edhe me projektet infrastrukturës rrugore, por kjo duhet bërë pasi të sigurohemi që të tejkalojmë disa pengesa në situatën aktuale. Ana tjetër e historisë sigurisht ka të bëjë me digjitalen dhe me rritjen e kapaciteteve këtu brenda vendit, duke hapur një horizont të ri për të rinjt. Kemi shumë të rinj të talentuar, ashtu siç në çdo vend të rajonit që duhet të shoqërohen përmes një mënyre shumë më të gjithanshme e gjithëpërfshirëse të prezantimit të tyre me botën digjitale. Pra do të ndryshojmë krejtësisht programin e informatikës në shkolla, duke e sjellë në një epokë tjetër, sepse laboratorët e vjetër dhe mënyra e vjetër e mësimit të saj nuk përmbush e nuk përballet dot në sfidat e kohës. Gjithashtu do të angazhohem përpjekjet financiare në kodim për të pasur sa më shumë të jetë mundur të rinj të cilët përfshihen në kodim. Puna është në vazhdim te piramida për ta transformuar nga qendrat më të mëdha rajonale teknologjisë, por nuk është e vetmja. Jemi duke u përpjekur për qendrën e Vlorës, në Korçë kemi tashmë ku biblioteka e re ka një hapësirë mjaft të këndshme të vogël që po rritet e do të bëhet edhe më e madhe. Duam të bëjmë të njëjtën gjë për Durrësin, Shkodrën e në faza të mëtejshme të përfshim dhe bashki të tjera. Kjo po kështu vjen shoqëruar me nevojën për të ecur paralelisht me rritjen e investimeve në kapitalin njerëzor përmes qasjes të re ndaj universiteteve. Duke mos dashur që të marrë më shumë prej kohës suaj dhe me shpresën që ajo çfarë thash e di që nuk është e re për ju, por shpresoj që të ketë qenë e dobishme, dua ta përmbyll me bindjen se pavarësisht mendimit që për shkak të faktit që Bashkimi Evropian nuk ka qenë në gjendje të mbajë fjalë në raport me procesin e integrimit dhe këtë herë për shkak të diçkaje që nuk ishte as pak e parashikuar, siç ishte Bullgaria, që doli. Unë jam optimist dhe jam optimist në mënyrë të arsyeshme, sepse besoj fort që ndjesia e komunitetit midis Bashkimit Evropian dhe Ballkanit Perëndimor po rritet në Evropë mes udhëheqësve dhe ndjesia e përgjegjësisë po kështu karshi Ballkanit Perëndimor po rritet dhe ndjej që ka një kuptim më të madh të rëndësishë të Ballkanit për shumë arsye për të ardhmen e Evropës, jo vetëm për të ardhmen, por gjithashtu edhe për të tashmen. Kështu që faleminderit shumë dhe shpresoj që kjo të ishte e dobishme për ju. Faleminderit.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister.
Faleminderit shumë i nderuar zoti kryeministër. Në fakt, ne e filluam këtë aktivitet sot me Ministrinë e Drejtësisë, me Ministritë e Drejtësisë nga Shqipëria, Kosova, Maqedonia e Veriut dhe Ministri Manja foli për procesin e Berlinit dhe një proces Berlini madje për bashkëpunimin gjyqësor. U fol po ashtu në ato forum edhe për vlerat Bashkimit Evropian si edhe vlerat thelbësore të Bashkimit Evropian. Dhe tani kam kënaqësinë dhe nderin që t'ja kaloj fjalën panelistëve të panelit të parë, ja kaloj fjalën ministres Belinda Balluku, ministri Tomislav Momirovic, ministrit Mladen Bojanic, zotit Liburn Aliu, zotit David McAllister dhe zonjës Romana Blautin, ambasadore për ndërlidhjen. Do të moderohet nga zoti Knut Fleckenstein, një mik jo vetëm i Shqipërisë, por edhe i Ballkanit Perëndimor. Knut, për ju, faleminderit shumë. Në ekran unë shoh
for the development, and I would appreciate if this would not go in the hands of the European Union bureaucracy, but stays outside there. Was there any chance to speak about the future of Berlin process?
Dear Knut, do you hear me?
Yes.
The Prime Minister just left, so before being able to receive your questions. So, but we will transmit it to him. So, I mean, you can we can continue with the panel.
Thank you very much, Ariane. And now I see that
I'm here.
We are at least in 5 already, and I would like to welcome the panelists to our first panel, Building Better Balkans Together, the Connectivity Agenda. We just heard from the Prime Minister Rama at the beginning some words about the situation in general and the summit. And maybe I'm not too happy with the first 10 lines, but if you see then in the text, you find a lot of very concrete things. And one is the point 13, the economic and investment plan, and we speak here about some 30 billion, enable a new momentum to enhance connectivity in all its dimensions, both within the Western Balkan and with the EU. The EU will continue to support inclusive regional cooperation and so on. This is what we are talking about. But first of all, I would like to ask Mr. McAllister, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, to say something about his view on the summit. And maybe a second question just behind is the European Parliament will be represented in the reorganized Western Balkan investment framework in the governance mechanism. Well, what do you think about this and the chance of the Parliament to watch where the money is going to? David McAllister, the floor is yours. Up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, dear Knut Fleckenstein, for inviting me. And I was already connected, but only as a careful listener. And it was extremely interesting for me to also hear what Prime Minister Edi Rama had to say. So it's an honor for me to engage in this panel debate. I send you kind regards from Baden-Württemberg in Germany. And I would like to briefly, Knut, just share my thoughts how we can bring the Western Balkans closer to the EU and the EU closer to the Western Balkans by boosting cooperation, connectivity, and convergence. I agree with you, dear Knut, and also with Edi Rama that yesterday's Western Balkans summit in Brdo near Ljubljana came at a critical juncture for the EU and its Western Balkan partners, having followed the discussions around the conclusions. In the end, I'm happy that we found a text which clearly, once again, underlines that the EU is open for enlargement. We have to admit that the progress has been slower than expected on both sides. We have to invest more efforts in moving the enlargement process forward. On the one hand, this means for the European Union, we must reinforce the merit-based process, unlock blockages, and fulfill our commitments. On the other hand, all the countries of the region must redouble genuine reconciliation, democracy building, and reform efforts. Enlargement of the area of freedom, democracy, and single market is in the European Union's DNA, and it will be a success if both sides remain committed to norms, values, and rules. Now, sufficient funding is necessary, but not a sufficient element of the equation. It is underpinned by political will, integrity, and compromise. As Edi Rama correctly described, huge challenges still have to be tackled in order to build long-term resilience and enable a post-COVID-19 socio-economic recovery across the whole of Southeastern Europe. Now, what does building better Balkans together actually mean? In my view, it means bringing tangible benefits for people in inclusive societies by advancing education, economic growth and jobs, sustainable trade, supporting green and digital transitions, enabling connectivity under the framework, and this is important, of viable democratic institutions and the rule of law. This last aspect, without which no progress will be possible, is reconciliation as a building block of a genuine and inclusive regional cooperation, including the creation of a common regional market. A united Europe is about people trading, traveling, studying, starting families and exchanging ideas, and all this across borders. So by focusing on connecting infrastructure and economies, we must not neglect the importance of connecting people, promoting reconciliation and facilitating everyday exchanges. And therefore, I am happy that this Tirana Connectivity Forum embraces a comprehensive definition of convergence and connectivity, and also focuses on the role of institutional and people-to-people connectivity, going beyond the sometimes rather narrow approach covering only transport, infrastructure, and regulation. Now, Knut, you asked about how we are supposed to finance this all. I would first of all like to mention and underline the importance of the new instrument for pre-accession assistance, IPA-free. Just 2 weeks ago, on the 20th of September, the new IPA governing the 7-year funding for the enlargement process has entered into force. Let me also recall the merits of our moderator, Knut Fleckenstein, who in the last term, 2014-2019, was one of the co-rapporteurs that guided the negotiating position of the European Parliament on the IPA-free back in 2018-2019, and his good work was now successfully concluded by Juliana Zovko and Tonino Pizzula, 2 colleagues in the Foreign Affairs Committee. I followed the IPA-free trilogues very carefully. I participated in them, and I am glad that in the end, the modernized IPA-free instrument unlocks funding for an upgraded, quote, hardware and software, unquote, of the enlargement process. This instrument will bring genuinely strategic, targeted, conditional, visible, and sustainable support to candidate and potential candidate countries in the face of joint challenges. IPA-free enables mobilization of resources needed for implementing the economic and investment plan and also the green agenda. Let me briefly touch upon the main improvements of the governance of IPA, because this is important for the countries in the Western Balkans. I would like to make 3 points. First, we have moved towards a policy-driven approach based on a more strategic outlook, including under the Economic and Investment Plan and its flagship initiatives. This covers the improved strategic planning and implementation on the one hand, and the strategic communication visibility of the EU funding on the other. Second, IPA3 ensures flexibility under the dynamic performance-based approach based on monitoring and evaluation, with thematic priorities replacing country envelopes. The new instrument mainstreams climate and environmental protection, human rights and gender equality, envisaging better donor coordination and enhanced involvement of local and regional authorities and civil society organizations. And third, increased conditionality means that assistance can be adjusted or suspended in cases where fundamental values, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are being undermined, creating an enabling environment for free media and civil society are essential in this regard. Why am I saying this? Because I believe it is particularly important that the EU is a community of rules and values and not simply a community of roads, bridges, and pipelines. The EU support comes with the strings attached, and there is a clear reason for that. This is taxpayers' money aimed to facilitate long-term political, institutional, legal, administrative, social, economic reforms, bringing the enlargement countries closer to the EU, its standards and practices. Not only I, but many of us in Brussels have witnessed that seemingly non-conditional support, which ignores socio-economic and financial sustainability, ends up with, I would always call them white elephant projects, such as roads to nowhere. And they can even lead to the loss of control over strategic resources. So let me also underline the importance of not only ensuring good value for money, but also protecting the EU's financial interests by fighting corruption and by fighting organized crime. The software of the enlargement process is no less important than its hardware, which is necessary, but not a sufficient element of the transformation. True, asphalt will always be more costly than the building of democratic institutions, but infrastructure improvement is a much easier attainable task than the transformation of laws, rules, and political culture. The final change I would like to underline, dear Knut, is the improved democratic scrutiny of the IPA3 funding by the European Parliament through its involvement in defining the instrument's objectives and thematic priorities, and by providing orientations, strategic steering and guidance for the IPA implementation. This has been achieved, from my point of view, through some legislative improvements reinforced by the delegated acts procedure and a regularly geopolitical dialogue with the Commission, with its first round already to be held this month. A final point, let's be honest, 14.2 billion euros of the IPA3 funding is far from enough to tackle the immense challenges that the whole region faces and to bridge and to close the socio-economic gap. Nevertheless, the impact of the EU funding will be maximized by coupling it with public and private investments to be crowded in through the support of the Western Balkans Guarantee Facility. So the ball is now in the court of the Commission in order to facilitate mobilization of public and private investments by international financial institutions, national, regional, local authorities, and private entities. Let me stop there and thank you once again for participating.
Thank you very much, David. It shows us not only change, which is under discussion when we speak about connectivity, it showed us also how much you are connected with the region, as I personally know since years. Let us now, next step, go a little bit more in concrete. And we have 4 people with us until now, 2, but 2 will follow. who are dealing with connectivity every day. And maybe Mr. Momirovic, I can start with you, because given Serbia's position as one of the front runners in connectivity infrastructure and as a powerhouse in Western Balkan, the audience, I think, will be interested to listen to the assessment of your country at the crossroad of regional transport and energy networks and on concrete projects on the regional scale. Mr. Momirovic, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. Fleckenstein. Dear ladies, gentlemen, thank you for giving me the floor and for inviting me in the first place to address today's important forum. I'm very glad that the topic of connectivity, thus mutual cooperation, is in the focus of our attention today, as it should always be the case. Namely, I personally think that cooperation at global, regional, multilateral, or bilateral level is the core of today's world. This has been clear and very visible during pandemic COVID-19, which has shown us how important it is to have partners on which you can rely on. That being said, Serbia had enough responsibility to do what it could to help others in process of immunization, showing a true sense of solidarity, which was of vital importance. Of course, I'm sure that there is a common position that without solid ground based on solidarity, cooperation, and support among partners, there cannot be any further progress when speaking about connectivity as such. In that manner, when we turn our focus back to our geopolitical position, it is clear that through history we have always stood strong for cooperation, as it is today, both through cooperation with our European partners and among Western Balkan partners. We are aware that only by working together and accepting regional cooperation within various regional initiatives such as the Common Market, the Open Balkan Initiative, Green Corridors, or the Berlin Process, can we bring our economies closer, increase the well-being of our people, and bring in large investment. In that sense, I'm glad that yesterday, EU leaders, with consent of Western Balkan partners, adopted a declaration at the EU Western Balkan Summit in which they uniquely support the European perspective of the Western Balkan and reaffirm their commitment to the enlargement process. This means that despite some delays in the enlargement process, together we will continue to seek to identify new ways, policies areas, and financial instruments in order for all of us to increase contribution to Europe and strengthen ties with the European Union. Strong support to the regional cooperation was once again confirmed through adopting of economic and investment plans for the Western Balkans and Green Agenda, which aim to spur the long-term economic recovery of the region, support the green and digital transition, and foster regional integration and convergence with the European Union, as well as sustainable connectivity. I'm deeply convinced that we have a huge potential for sustainable growth and development in order to improve the economic potential of the region and achieve better infrastructural connectivity, which would lead to approaching the single European market. Having said that, it is a priority to further develop transport connections both within the region and the region with the EU, especially with regard to road and railway transport. Sustainable transport represents a cornerstone for the economic and social integration of the EU and the Western Balkans. The fact that the capital cities of Western Balkans are situated at the heart of Europe, but that it takes us twice as long to travel between them, it should in practice. Calls for readiness of all of us and a unique response of the entire region to change the transport picture. When it comes to the Republic of Serbia, we have conducted bold economic reforms which have resulted in stable economy that has succeeded to stay resilient even in the time of COVID-19. Serbia is increasingly competitive due to a serious and responsible attitude towards the budget and investors, but also due to the planned approach to relevant infrastructure projects that are extremely important for further investment. I would like to bring to your attention the newest fact. World Bank raised Serbia's 2029 growth forecast by for 1 percentage point to 6% in an updated autumn report on the World Economic Outlook released yesterday. Serbia's GDP growth for 2021 has been revised upwards to 6% from the previously forecast 5% as predicted in June. We are using the great momentum and stable economy to attract even more investments that will help us to completely reshape Serbia's image in accordance with highest international standards. Furthermore, one of the results of the strong political will and the good economic foundations that we have established in the previous period under the leadership of our president and numerous projects from the domain of construction, transport, and infrastructure. In that manner, as a powerhouse of the Western Balkans, Republic of Serbia launched dozens of infrastructural projects in rail, road, water traffic, as well as in the air traffic. Given today's topic, I would like to mention some of the projects of regional importance, such as modernization of railway or of Corridor 10, which includes works on the Belgrade-Niš section and which is going to be supported by EU partners. Further modernization of rail will be divided into two sections. First, we'll go towards the border with the Republic of North Macedonia, and second, towards border with the Republic of Bulgaria. We are expecting to have high-speed trains that will approach the speed of around 200 kilometers per hour. This will shorten up the time for traveling from 4 to 7 times. Apart from that, it is very important to mention the overall significance of rail sector as such, especially knowing that this year celebrates the Year of Rail, and that in line with the green agenda, rail sector represents one of the cleanest ways in traffic. In that light, I would also highlight the importance of the transport community, with whom we have very close cooperation and which was our partner in organizing Rail Summit in Belgrade a few weeks ago. On the other hand, within mentioned Corridor 10, we are working on construction of highway Niš-Merdare, which is divided in two sections. The first section is covering the route from Niš to Pločnik, and another route is covering Pločnik to Merdare. Our ambition is to connect the Niš and Pristina in the next years, and we have strong support of EIB and EBRD in that project. Moreover, I would like to mention that we are also working on one of the biggest infrastructural projects, highway Belgrade to Sarajevo, for which an estimated value on the territory of Serbia is more than 1 billion euro. And taking into account the value of the construction on the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the total value is around 2 billion. All these projects have one goal: to speed up time of traveling, and by doing so, to contribute to the overall connectivity of the region. That is, to ensure the economic growth and stability of the entire region. In line with this, and in parallel with today's focus, I'm also glad that visits of Chancellor Angela Merkel and President of EU Commission Ursula von der Leyen to Belgrade and the region were successful, and that we could hear good and positive messages. Namely, during the visit of President von der Leyen, the beginning of work on the modernization of the railway corridor 10 has marked. And let me just conclude. After speaking about some of the important questions, it seemed to me that success stories come only if we are working together. Further on, I'm deeply convinced that we can build better Balkans, achieve a lot, connect economics, and demonstrate all our advantage if we act as a partners together. One more, Mr. Fleckenstein, thank you for time.
Thank you, Mr. Momirovic. Mr. McAllister, you want to say something? No, that was a mistake. Then I would like to ask Mr. Alio to take the floor. We know that Kosovo access roads to EU and world market goes through Western Balkan neighbors, cross-border. And regional cooperation factor is obligatory when planning transport and energy infrastructure. So my question is, Mr. Aliu, how does Kosovo integrates its geographical position in connectivity infrastructure planning? Any concrete examples? The floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Mr. Flankstein, dear Mr. McAllister, dear ministers, and dear Mr. Prime Minister Rama. And it was very interesting to hear all these speeches. And it's a pleasure for me to be a part of this very interesting meeting for us. Actually, since Kosovo has no direct border line with EU, these conferences are very interesting for us because in order to reach the European countries and European Union, we should cross through the neighboring countries. And therefore, we take part in these conferences with a very big interest, and we want to be a part of all these projects that are quite interesting for us. We have been taking part in these conferences, and we took also a lot of measures and projects that are a part of concerning modernization of the existing infrastructure that we have, working on the legislation, trying to harmonize interoperability, and working on the cross-border points. Actually, the last decade for Kosovo, it was a decade of highways. We built highways connecting Pristina with Tirana in Prizren, through Prizren. So this was an interesting highway that had a big cost, about $1 billion from both sides. So it means only the Kosovo part was almost €1 billion. And on the other hand, in parallel to that, we also built the other highway concerning Skopje. So from Pristina to Skopje toward North Macedonia, from Pristina toward Albania. And on the other hand, there is a project that we are continuing with a highway toward Merdare to link it with Serbia in Niš and connect it to the Corridor 10. So in a way, this highway will connect two corridors. The last point of Corridor 8 in Durrës and with Niš, the corridor in the north. On the other hand, there is also concerning the infrastructure, road infrastructure from east to the west, in order to bring our road infrastructure closer to Montenegro. We have been investing on the highway and corridor toward Peja, our western city, and so this will bring a kind of connection toward Montenegro too. On the other hand, on the railway infrastructure that recently we have been investing in, that is the EBRD fund, together with the grants from European Union. There is a project that will modernize and digitalize the railway from southern part in border with North Macedonia in Honje Lezit toward Lešak in Serbia. So toward Lešak, the border, the cross border with Serbia in the northern part. This project will be in three parts. The first part is already from the border with Macedonia toward Pristina, is already ongoing. Just recently, we are about to sign the contract from Pristina to Mitrovica, and then we will start also from Mitrovica to northern point of Kosovo in Lešak. Actually, this railway will connect Corridor 8, so towards Shkup, with Corridor 10 toward Serbia. Also, I just want to give my greetings to Prime Minister that mentioned also the corridor that connects Durrës with Montenegro. So the railway that is going to be invested soon that will connect Durrës to Honehotet in the north of Albania with Montenegro, and in which he mentioned also this connection of this railway with the Pristina and Niš, with the railway on Corridor 10. This is a very interesting project that will make closer for both ports of Durrës and of Bari in Montenegro. So this connection will be directly connected with the Corridor 10 through Pristina and Niš. This connection also will make good connectivity for Kosovo to connect with the corridor, a blue corridor, Adriatic corridor. For this, we had meetings with Prime Minister here, with two governments, and also there was a meeting with the Minister of Infrastructure in Albania, and we agreed that we will start with the pre-feasibility study. In parallel to this, on the railway infrastructure, this infrastructure also, according to an agreement, it is from Pristina toward Merdare, in parallel to the highway that is going to be built, in the same way as Mr. Momirovic mentioned, the highway that will come from Niš toward Merdare. I think by the time that it's going to be finished, the other part of the highway is going to be done. Also the highway that's remained only about 27 kilometers from Pristina toward Merdare to connect with Corridor 10. And in parallel to that is going to be constructed also the railway that will connect, as it is mentioned by also Prime Minister Rama, with Durrës, so from Durrës to Pristina toward Niš in Corridor 10, and then in Corridor 8 also through Skopje and Sofia. In internal projects concerning railway, our railway projects are going to be also developed toward the west in Peja city of Kosovo, that will make it closer also to Montenegro. So also there could be a possibility to connect the Montenegrin railway through Peja, although that is also quite a difficult project because it will pass through very high mountains that are cursed mountains. And I think the best solution in this, after the pre-feasibility study, this connection between Pristina and railway that will connect Bari in Montenegro, Durrës, with that railway with Pristina and Corridor 10 in Niš, it will be for an importance for us. And in all of these projects, this focusing on railways for Kosovo is going to be very important, because we want to bring back the communication on railways in order to have less impact on climate change issues, to make them electrical and modern railways. And on the other hand, in our existing highways, there are projects that are going to be in line with the climate change mitigation and adaptation policies that are about creating policies for electrical vehicles and other possibilities in order to mitigate and adapt in climate changes. In parallel to all of this, in Corridor 8, since the Corridor 8 is going to be developed from Skopje toward Albania in Durrës, and in Prizren, in Pristina, this is a highway that will connect Tirana to Pristina. There is a project also that we make an agreement with Macedonia government in order to build the new way that will connect these two corridors, these two lines. So highway from Tirana to Pristina to be connected from Prizren to Tetova with another road that it is already, we have agreed with the government of North Macedonia. The two prime minister has signed a memorandum, and in our meetings we think that soon we will start off doing the feasibility study and starting the design as soon as possible. So in general, for us, we are quite interesting. We have been investing, and also we are in line with EU policies in order to develop our infrastructure, having in mind the environmental protection and connectivity. With cross-border points, with Albania, we already have our cross-border point. With Macedonia, there is agreement that is going to be signed soon for cross-border on the road, and we already have done the agreement for the railway on cross-border. With Serbia, there are few points that we agreed, and so some of them we have started already to have the joint cross-border points, and I think that on this policy we are getting connected, and we are having efforts to get connected, to create better policies with interoperability and being connected. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Aliu. Thank you very much. Before I give the floor to Ambassador Vlahutin, because two of our participants are traveling, and we get signals that they will be shortly, in short time, on the panel. I have a last question for David McAllister before he has to leave us, an ugly one maybe. David, how do you explain to your voters in Germany, in the EU, that all these projects are also in their interests, in the EU interests and in the interests of the citizens? Mr. McAllister.
Well, thank you, Knut. In the last term, the two of us had similar challenges to face. Knut Fleckenstein, as you all know, was the rapporteur for Albania, and I was the rapporteur for Serbia. And of course, further EU enlargement isn't always an easy sell to constituents, to voters in Northern Europe. But if you explain that the Western Balkans are an integral part of Europe, that they are surrounded by EU countries, that there is no region in Europe which is connected to us so closely, historically, politically, and economically, and that you make clear that Europe, a united Europe without the Western Balkan countries, would not be complete, then people get the message. And history has shown stability in the Balkans brings stability to the whole continent. Instability in the Balkans brings instability to the whole continent. So it's in our own interest that we support the 6 countries of the Western Balkans on their way towards strengthening the rule of law, democracy, and many other issues. And one integral part, Knut, is connectivity. Connectivity is about facilitating the free movement of people, simplifying border crossing procedures, enable mutual recognition of qualifications, ensure smart mobility, modernizing the rail sector, reducing bank charges, or attracting foreign direct investments. Many issues both ministers from Serbia and Kosovo just mentioned, also the Prime Minister. And I believe that this European taxpayers' money is well invested, bring us closer to the Western Balkans and bring our partners and friends from the Western Balkans closer to us, and also to bring them together, because connectivity is also a part of necessary long-term sustainable reconciliation.
I couldn't agree more. So thank you very much, David McAllister. I know that you have a meeting which already started, but I hope also that you can get rid of that meeting very soon and have a nice all the best, and thank you for being here at the Tirana Connectivity Forum. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Hvala. Mali Benderet.
Romana Vlahutin, it's so great to see you again after a while, after so long time. You are dealing with connectivity and with geopolitics. This is both very much connected. Where does the Western Balkan 6 stand in the larger European connectivity strategy? As a consigliere of Western Balkans, I'd like to ask you if there are lessons to be drawn from the implementation of EU connectivity agenda in the Western Balkans that can transpose to a larger scale. So, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Knut. It's wonderful to see you again. Mirdita, dobar dan. I think this would have been nicer if we could be in Tirana, all of us, but here we are on our screens. A lot has been said, a lot of very important things have already been said, so I will try to sum up in two ways. First, I'll zoom out a little bit and go to the Brussels level or to European level, and then go back to the Balkans as your question to me was put. I am Ambassador at Large and Special Envoy for Connectivity, and this is quite a recent function, because I think in the maybe last decade it became very clear that connectivity is becoming more and more geopolitical. And that when we talk about connectivity, we don't talk about things. We don't talk about the particular highway or railway or just a sum of things, but about systemic solutions that shape the strategic environment in which we function. So it is about infrastructure, physical infrastructure, but is also equally so, or even more, about the values that standardize that work. And here I would want to bold every single word that Chairman has mentioned, Mr. McAllister, about the importance of the rule of law and about the importance of standard in this work. Because, as much as connectivity is a precondition for economic growth, and this is well researched, the World Bank says that in developing countries, investment in infrastructure raises the growth up to 7%. It is also about security. Connectivity defines trade routes, it defines supply chains. These days we're talking a lot about energy security. I think this pandemic has also brought a very important lesson on digital security. So in order to create this community of trust where security is one of the pivotal issues, I think the issue of values cannot be overstated. This is very clear here in Brussels, and European Union is looking at connectivity in an integrated way. I believe that you have heard President of the Commission, who in her union speech said that we are working on the global strategy, what we call global gateways, and that strategy will capture this geopolitical importance of connectivity. And I personally believe, not only as someone who comes from very close to Tirana, I would say, that it is pivotal to keep Western Balkans firmly within this European discussion on connectivity. When you fly over Europe, Western Balkans are not neighboring territory. They are literally almost an enclave within the EU space. So when we talk about European connectivity and Western Balkans connectivity, for me, it's one and the same. It cannot go without each other. I think this is very important. And I think that the new investment plan, a very ambitious plan, I have to say, when you look at the numbers and the possibilities, understands this, recognizes this, and provides quite some serious and ample instruments to implement it. We're talking about possible 30 billion euros. It's a lot of money. It's a massive chance for the region in this moment of energy transition, digital transition, to really jump a generation of development, if you wish, and use everything that is being offered in a smart and efficient way. As for the lessons to be drawn, because I was also an ambassador on the ground and I worked on these projects, there are a couple of them. I think we really cannot afford to wait any longer. I was born in Dubrovnik and I was an ambassador, EU ambassador to Tirana. The distance between Dubrovnik and Tirana is 270 kilometers. It would take me on an extremely good day at least 6 hours to pass that distance. This is not possible. This is not the speed of the 21st century. So we really have to understand that we are behind. We have to get to this work with a seriousness and urgency that it requests. Also, we have to understand that this is basically an existential need in order to really create proper economic growth, keep people in these countries, create opportunities in these countries. It's absolutely necessary to put a lot of attention in upgrading connectivity, because if we don't do, somebody else will. And I think we have also already seen the fallout when it comes to certain highways, digital centers, also coal plants, etc., which in the end, takes the region further from European standards and will make it more costly and more lengthier to overcome this. The second thing is we really have to let go of fragmentation, because connectivity is something that by definition links one to another. So when we talk about connectivity, we cannot talk about one country, not even one region. We have to talk about the larger space. It is really important. I think it will require also a bit of a mentality change, but we have to think that way. And third, and this is, I had my boots on the ground in a number of these projects. I think we have to be much faster. We have to be much more efficient. And we have to make sure that we look at the entire life cycle of a project. When you talk about an infrastructure project, you're also talking about what comes after, the maintenance and the ability to really get value for money. Let me just zoom into the Blue Highway, the one that I love and know best. It is a highway that will be built in different countries, but it's one highway. Does it make sense to have 3, 4, 5 project implementation units, or maybe one, which will then integrate all the knowledge, which will make everything much faster and more efficient? Prime Minister mentioned absorption capacity, and that is a serious issue, because if you split, if you go into bits and pieces and everybody just takes care of their own thing, we will never be able to speed up the work. And I will finish with something which I firmly believe is the most important thing, and that's human capital. In order to keep people in the region, in order to help the region become more competitive, we really need to invest in knowledge transfer, in skill transfer. We have to double down on technical assistance, and we have to make sure that the region itself builds all that it needs so that it can carry on with these investments for the future. None of what we are talking about can happen without the involvement of private capital. No, the investment plan has 9 billion euros of grants. That's massive. But it's a seed money. To get the real scale, you need private capital. To get private capital, they have to have a trust in the situation that they are entering, in terms of the rule of law, in terms of transparency, in terms of again, human capital and knowledge that will be able to finish the project. So there are a number of things that can be done better for sure. I have to say I'm very happy when I listen to the discussion and there are particular projects that are emphasized. I think this is the way to go. But we need to understand that this needs to be done together, that when we talk about the connectivity space, there is one Europe. There is no division in that sense. And this is how we have to approach the whole connectivity discussion. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Romana. Yes, I can't agree more, because I have sometimes, as Mr. Mimorovich knows, something to do in Belgrade and maybe afterwards in Skopje and in Tirana. And this traveling is really very difficult, let's put it that way. But you spoke about the 30 billion, which is now not just spread over the region, but it's also a kind of competition between the projects, I think. What do you think about this kind of competition? I feel that if you cooperate with others, together have a project, it will be less costly and it will also be maybe more interesting to get the money and the start. I would be interested, Mr. Momirovic, to hear a bit about your concrete projects. I know that you have already spoken with the EU Commission and about such projects. Is it really one project team, or is it from country to country a team which hopefully fits together at the end?
Thank you, Mr. Fleckenstein. Well, Serbia is one big wave of huge infrastructure investment. We are now projecting or implementing more than 1,200 kilometers of highways and speed roads. We have to implement it and to invest in infrastructure that we didn't in our past. We have decades that threw away. Now we have to do what modern countries in Western European Union did, let's say 30 or 40 years ago. That's why we don't have much time. We have to invest those highways. We finished in last year's highway from Belgrade to the Čačak. It's in Western Serbia. We have to establish further that corridor to the Montenegro from one side and to the Sarajevo from another side. And we have to connect it to our capital with Eastern Serbia. We have to invest highways in the north. And that's the one part of the story. Second part of the story is investing in the rail infrastructure. In next month, we will finish the speed rail infrastructure from Belgrade to Novi Sad. There's the two biggest towns in Serbia will be connected with the modern, the fastest rail in Eastern Europe. You will come from Belgrade to Novi Sad for, let's say, around 30 minutes. And we will continue to invest from Novi Sad to the Hungarian border from one side and from Belgrade to the Niš with our EU partners on the south. It's not only about the passenger transition, it's also about the cargo transport. We are now our economy is developing very speed. We will have around 6% increase in our GDP. So we have to support that growth of economy. We have to support our industry base, our mining, and we have to invest more money in cargo traffic. Also, we will invest in water infrastructure. We will invest in our ports in Novi Sad, Prahovo, Sremska Mitrovica, and in next years in Belgrade. For us, it's very important to connect the rails with port. To our infrastructure, we connected with from one side with Donau, and from other side with Adriatic River and Adriatic Sea and Ionian Sea, with rail infrastructure and with the ports. That's, let's say, in the short, what we are doing. I can tell you that the total amount of our project in infrastructure, it's around 23 billion euros. we will invest that in the next 10 years.
Thank you very much. Mr. Aliu, I had the pleasure to visit you some weeks ago, and we spoke not about so much about connectivity, we spoke more about Green Deal, but you cannot really divide that into totally different parts. How much is the green aspect of these connectivity projects important for you? And if I may, a second question, can you tell us something about the chances and the difficulties for public-private partnership projects to get the private partners? What can the EU do to encourage partners, for example, in our member states, to come closer to the idea of this partnership? Mr. Aliu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flankstein. Concerning the green environment, so all these projects in general, they have their impact. What is very important for us is Pristina is one of the most polluted cities in the region. And therefore, orientation and focusing toward rail, it's actually one of the priorities that will make us create better conditions for less pollution. Also, we will need, with the project that we have in front now, it's building infrastructure for charging for the electrical cars. For us, it was impossible now to use electrical cars since we don't have any kind of electrical charging infrastructure. And therefore, these are two priorities concerning the climate change mitigation. On the other hand, we are about to develop all our mobility plans in the cities and bring these ring roads around the cities and create these better connections. Kosovo is a little country, and all our ring roads were in a way are going to be also the highways that will bring very close to the border. And what is very important was it's something that is mentioned for the second question, is the how we can bring here private investors and how to create this. I would like to connect also to Mr. Momirovic's speech and discussion when he mentioned the links between ports and corridors. Recently, we were in Tirana, in a summit there, and it was interesting how the port it was the port of Durrës is planning to be developed. On the other hand, there is the famous port of Bar. The connection of these two ports are going to be, as it is mentioned by Mr. Prime Minister Rama, with a rail, and it is unavoidable to connect this blue corridor, as Mr. Romanov-Lautin mentioned, Ms. Ambassador mentioned. It is also for us, also for the Corridor 10, it is unavoidable to be in a way connected between these two, and the way of connecting is through Pristina toward Niš in Corridor 10. So I think that is going to be also a challenge and interesting to be focused also for the private sector. Of course, both areas, the railway is going to pass through. There are a lot of mines there and rich places, areas with mines, and it can be used for other topics also. But the cargo transport, it is unavoidable to have this let us say, to build a new corridor. It might be followed also with the road if it is necessary, but to create this connectivity between corridors with with the railways, with the rail. And I think this is one of the main interesting topics that can bring investors also in Kosovo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Momirovic. Do you have an advice for us? No, I don't ask you, because I just see that Mr. Bojanic has joined us, and a warm welcome to you. I know that you were traveling a lot, and so we are very happy that you are, at least at the end now, with us. And if I may, I just would start with a question to you. As Montenegro is a pioneer in cross-border cooperation initiatives with its neighbors, you just, only with Albania, you've recently opened the second point, border crossing point. What are the challenges and the advantages, and how can this expertise or experience both be used by others when we speak about connectivity? Because it's very nice to ask for or to want it, and it's quite difficult in the day-by-day business. Okay. So the floor is yours, and again, very welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Fleckenstein, and just to say hello to everybody, all my colleagues and all participants in this meeting. And as you already told, I'm on my way these days, and currently I'm in Malaga, in Andalusia, in Spain. So we have many meetings these days. So I promise to Ardian that I do my best to join this meeting. So I've done it and I don't have much time. But as you said, that Montenegro is having several contract actually programs with connecting neighbors country by integrated cross-border. So one of the first is with Albania, with lake traffic, and I'll give you some details about it. Then we can talk about others, because we have also project with rail, cross-border rail with Serbia, and also road cross-border with Bosnia and Herzegovina. So some of them are already in progress, are done. Some of them are in progress and should be finished, I don't know, within 2 years. So just to give you some information about Albania lake traffic border with Montenegro. So initiative of establishing the lake traffic and connection of Montenegro and the Republic of Albania, which is supported by European Union through the Almond MTC project, compromises the construction of a number of docks in the coastal area of the Lake of Skadar in the Republic of Albania, and the construction of a port in Virpazar in Montenegro. With the construction of the port of Virpazar as a port open for internal traffic through the joint border crossing Skla, the international lake traffic with Albania will be established. In support of this, the agreement between the government of Montenegro and the Council of Ministers of the Republic of Albania was signed in June 2018, and it stipulates the opening of the joint border crossing Skla-Zogaj for international road and lake traffic. The joint border crossing will be constructed on the territory of Montenegro in the place called Skla, situated on the road Bar-Ostros-Široka-Skadar. The location of the border crossing, along with its technical parameters, will be defined by the Joint Commission of Montenegro and Albania. So we had joint commission for that. The establishment of the increase in the passenger traffic in the lake water transport will significantly unburden the only border crossing in this area, namely the border crossing Sukobin, which is exclusively intended for road traffic. In the scope of the project terms of references, the port of Virpazar is envisaged as the port of transport of passengers, which will greatly improve the safety of boarding of tourists in Virpazar and those passengers who will travel and go back to the Republic of Albania. So, just to tell you from experience, and it's let's say win-win situation for all these neighboring countries if we manage to make integrated cross-border. It will benefit for all citizens, all economy. I mean, let's say for everybody. So we are very, very keen to do with all neighboring countries something similar.
Are there any projects in the pipeline for the future?
Yes, we have also a project with Serbia on rail that we decide together, of course, in cooperation with Serbia, that Bilo Polje station will be a common cross-border for both countries. So the passengers and the trains they are not going to let's say cross-border double cross-boarding. So it will save pretty much time for everybody.
Thank you.
These initiatives are very good, very important, and we would like to have as many as we can.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you very much. So I have to leave now. In regards to everybody, I'm just dropping a hotel. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
We have so many meetings. Thanks a lot, Minister. Romana Vlautin, we slowly close the round. But I would like to ask you at the end of this session, you have discussions with a lot of other countries as well and regions in the world. When you think about connectivity with Asia, so it's a much broader context than we are discussing today. But I think it's always about the same issues why we are speaking about connectivity. And maybe you find some roundup words about this connectivity, especially for the region, but also what we can learn from your experience discussing connectivity with others far away from us.
Absolutely, thank you very much. As you rightly put, it's a much larger discussion, and it's with the whole of Asia, in particular regions in Asia, with Africa, with Latin America, with our partners. But for me, of course, the Western Balkans and the importance of the Western Balkans can never be underestimated. And we talk a lot about flagships in the context of connectivity. We'll talk a lot about particular investments in particular projects that are high impact projects that really change the economic growth of a certain country or other elements that are linked to it. But for me, in a way, Western Balkans should be a flagship project itself. I think we should put every effort in really moving the region in terms of its connectivity with the rest of the European Union to a level where this is one space. Why connectivity is becoming so important, I think partly also, it has always been important. The famous sentence, all roads lead to Rome. And today it's super important because of the digital aspect. And the digital aspect brings an element of interdependence, which is crucial. This interdependence can be abused. It can also be used, of course, to our absolute benefit. And in order to manage this interdependence, you have to have some level of trust. I have to trust that the rules and the standards that we have commonly agreed, that she will respect them. And this is why also this constant discussion with the countries in the Western Balkans on norms, on standards, on rules, on the rule of law, because this is what generates trust. European Union itself is a result of connectivity actions. And I think what we want to do really is to use the best of knowledge that is there in methodology, but also in overcoming differences to create this trust that would make it possible for us to have seamless connectivity. I am really looking forward to pushing even harder and also creating even better conditions again for the private sector to come in. I think this should be our common goal, to move, from the logic of grants, to move from the logic of public money, and really create conditions for the private sector, European private sector, to come and invest in the countries in the region. I think that would be the best investment. Also in the human capital, if you wish, in a sense that it would create an opportunities for people to stay where they are, because I think demographics of the region are such that there is an alarm bell. And I think investing in connectivity can also help us. Young people are smart everywhere, and I think by investing in the youth and keeping them at home is the ultimate investment one can make. So that is in a sum. I mean, the Western Balkans is not a large space. I would even say, in terms of investment, it's not such an expensive space because of its size, but it's worth every effort. And this is what I think all of us are doing, putting all the effort we can into moving this agenda forward.
Thank you, Ambassador. If we would have the chance now to have a coffee together, I think the discussion would start, in fact, about concrete projects, about what is in the planning, what is to be discussed further and more concrete. But we are not. Anyway, I think that we got such a broad range of ideas, of projects, that we got known of that from Belgrade, from Pristina, also from Montenegro. And the input of Mr. McAllister and of you, Ambassador, I think make one thing clear, that these connectivity discussions are at the beginning. Yeah. We are planning, you are planning. Now it comes to the cooperation, in fact, how to deal with the projects and how to make all these projects one day realized. I would like to thank you all very much. I hope that you have the same impression that it was useful to start this debate today. And I'm very sure that we will find another way to continue because this is the start, not the end of connectivity discussions in the region, and not only in the region. Thank you very much to the organizers, to Tirana Connectivity Forum. And I now pass over a little bit too early because, that I have to say. Madam Baluku came straight from Washington. And I was really, I put here some really nice words for her to be on the panel. First Biden, then us, but she had now to turn to the right to come to the parliament because there is an important vote. So we will see her the next time in the next panel. and to all participants, thank you very much. And if I'm right, I now give the floor to the next panel already sitting there. I give the floor to Christian Hagemann, the Deputy Director of Südosteuropa Gesellschaft. Looking forward to your discussion. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Faleminderit.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Hear me? Yes. Now I can I can also hear you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fleckenstein. Thank you very much to CDI and to Adrian for inviting me to this panel. My name is Christian Hagemann, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Southeast Europe Association, or SOG. We are based in Munich, and what you see in the back is our headquarters, but unfortunately, I'm also currently not in Munich, but traveling and in Thessaloniki, and I'm keeping fingers crossed for the internet connection to hold. So, yeah, already apologies for any potential inconveniences. I must say that so briefly after the elections, the setup of the panel we have here this afternoon reminds me a little bit of the Triel debates we had in recent weeks before the Bundestag elections of the main party candidates in the election, even though, of course, in a very different setup. But eventually, I have to admit that this is, of course, a very poor comparison of our setup today, because we have a major difference here. And the difference is that this panel is not competitive or even adversary in any kind of way, but rather we are focusing on cooperation this afternoon. And I would also like to welcome Dr. Tobias Rötershoff, who's the head of the Albanian office of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation based in Tirana. Welcome, Dr. Rötershoff. And last but not least, we have Dr. Klaus Fiesinger, who is the regional director for Southeastern Europe of the Hans Seidel Foundation, based in Zagreb, I think. Welcome, Dr. Fiesinger. I see him nodding his head. You are a bit in a distance, but I think we can still communicate. Yeah, now I can see you closer. Thank you very much. So we have a very brief panel. We have about 30 minutes. We are going to have 3 rounds of questions, and each question is meant for each panelist here. And I would propose that we jump right in to make the best of the time we have. So looking at the situation in general, usually the political foundations have their own projects and agendas in the respective countries, focusing on different issues often. But in this instance, the FAST, the CAS, and the Hans Seidel Foundation have supported the Tirana Connectivity Forum jointly since 2015. So my first question would be, why did you decide to support the TCF in the first place? And is there probably a specific advantage of the issues of the Berlin process and the connectivity agenda that allows for cooperation specifically across the political spectrum. And I would like to give first to Stine Klapper.
Is it now on? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks again. Thanks for the question, and thanks for also having us here on the panel. So yes, I mean this is a cooperation that started in 2015, and I mean I was not personally involved back then, but one of my predecessors, and the idea back then, and I think this is still the idea why we're all supporting it, that the Berlin process and specifically in European integration in more general terms is pretty much a very broad consensus in Germany and among different German political parties, but also in general of the foreign policy of Germany and in general connected to the Berlin process. So this is a process which I think all different political views and parties, but also movements have supported, and this was also meant as a sign from us as political foundations that we're all behind this and that we're all in support of this. So both like from a German point of view, but also then translated to the situation here in Albania as to show that European integration and initiatives in the framework of the Berlin process are best realized if there is a political consensus behind it and support from all different political powers. And we wanted to show with our cooperation also that this is possible, that this is quite possible and also useful despite of differences on certain other political views, or in our case of the political foundation, differences in actually the different focus areas that we usually work on. So this is a topic of consensus and something that we wanted to support in a concerted manner.
Thank you very much. Dr. Rüttershoff, would you like to continue?
Yeah, sure. I can certainly add a bit to that. So thanks again also for having me here on the podium. I totally agree with what Stine said, that we need to look, especially here in Albania, but I think also in the whole region, at projects that can come across the party boundaries. And I believe that the Berlin process and particularly connectivity is one issue that can supply this version of non-partisan or cross-partisan issues that can be discussed. And as a matter of fact, it's very interesting because my notebook today is from the transport community, which is also, one of the success stories of the Berlin process, discussing connectivity in the region on the rail or also on the waterways. And I believe that this is also a topic that, most political parties can hopefully agree. I mean, of course, there will be discussions, or there are discussions of how things are to be implemented, but I think it is definitely something that is not so much in the daily politics and thus not so much open for contemptuous debate. And I believe that's also something for us to support. And definitely what Stine says, I can only underline, is the fact that, us as different political foundations, belonging to different political parties in Germany, do work together and can show that, cooperation is indeed possible.
Thank you. Dr. Fiesinger?
Yeah, thank you very much from my side. At the beginning of each project cooperation is, of course, the question why we do so. And in the special case of Tirana Connectivity Forum and with our close project partner, the Development and Cooperation Institute, of course, we took the same question. What is the intention? What is the impact? Is this approach corresponding to our agenda, to our project aims? And I think the same questions were also by my neighbors and colleagues. And we came to the unanimous conclusion that it does. It is really some good project which should be supported. And what is the mission? The mission is to fill this term connectivity with concrete life. And this is, I think, all these debates which we have here are going to this matter. And what is the function of us? And here it is corresponding all these three represented foundations and also the CDI. We are some bridge of communication. We are some mediator in different sectors. We are simply also some platform of dialogue, and this, I think, is fulfilled. And let me mention also some side effect, which was also by my colleagues already mentioned. Of course, it is clear to everybody that the political foundations are coming from different political spectrum. They have different ideas, different cooperation partners. This is this so-called pluralistic approach in Germany, which has been proved very well. And I think it must be emphasized that despite of all these differences, it is possible that political foundation, and this should be also transferred, of course, to parties, are willing and able to cooperate if the topic is from common interest, if the topic is justified and necessary to be tackled. And here, Tirana Connectivity Forum is some really good example.
Thank you very much. I think it's also a good sign that you not only all support the Tirana Connectivity Forum, but also seem to agree very much on the reasons why you support it. You mentioned that it's also meant to transport the idea that inter-party cooperation is possible, and that it's on the one hand meant to be a basis for discussion of projects of cross-party interest, but on the other side also as an example in a way of how cross-party cooperation can work. And this links already pretty well to my second question. So I would like to know, what are the lessons learned from your cooperation in this context? So how to cooperate among the party boundaries. So is there anything you would say that could be transferred to cross-party endeavors in the region? So probably a recommendation you could give to make cross-party endeavors in the region work. And I would give the floor now first to Dr. Rüttershoff.
Well, I certainly believe that this is a good example of how you can work, not just in Albania but also in the region. And let me maybe make a little advertisement for another project that we have together with FES here in Albania currently, which is actually starting tomorrow for its second edition. Is with young people, with the youth, because we believe that that's another issue where we can show that cooperation is possible, that politics is not just about clashing or fighting, but that you can also discuss hard but fair, and also reach consensus on certain issues. And before the Albanian elections in spring, we had the first edition together with the Albanian National Youth Congress and Euronews, where we had 6 editions. It was prime time, Friday evening, 2 young people discussing with young politicians from both sides. And it was very interesting because you didn't have the usual Albanian talk show format where you just have this fighting, but you had actually hard questions on the topic, and I think the politicians were put under pressure in that situation. And it was indeed a very successful project that we're now continuing with a second series. And I believe that is a sign that you can have this cooperation, and you can extend it to other issues. You can, for example, think of women's issues, gender issues, which I believe are also topics where we can find consensus and where maybe a common ground can be found. That doesn't mean that you need to agree on everything. That's absolutely not true. But I think what we discussed before, it's the political culture that needs to change here, and that needs to be improved in this situation.
So that's an interesting example, and probably it's also in a way possible, especially for issues where not the goal is in question, but basically the way how to reach that goal often. And I think I remember we also had this a lot in recent debates in our elections that we've seen. But Dr. Fiesinger, what is your opinion on this? Have you encountered any potential for recommendations?
Yes, my lessons learned are in the same way also my recommendations. The essential point is, in my opinion, that communication and dialogue is the best guarantee for some win-win situation for all stakeholders. And this is, of course, here in this forum the case, and this should be the case also entirely transposed through the Berlin process. What is, in my opinion, the added value? The added value is that here we are not only giving some debate, having some analysis. The added value is that we have also concrete recommendations how to transpose all these big theories which are made by the politicians in concrete projects. The third point is what I would like to mention. Berlin process is, of course, some common approach. It is some common endeavor, so it means also that it must be cross-party. Or let me say, in one of these Berlin summits, it was decided and rightly decided that the Berlin process is not only a cooperation from government to government, it is a cooperation from society and society. This includes, of course, also political parties. This includes all sectors of society. But at first level, we must be aware that this Berlin process is, of course, some cross-country approach. And let me finally recommend having in mind this, of course, we must look and be open for new patterns of communications, new patterns of communication, but in the same way also keep on traditional shapes of communication and cooperation, which has to be proved well and sustainable.
I think I also like this point that it's not only cross-party, but even cross-country. So at a larger scale, it would even transcend also these boundaries, as we've also heard on the concrete implementation of practical projects from the ambassador in the former panel. Stine Klapper.
Yes, I somehow have the urge now to disagree, right? Because as there's a lot of harmony here, and I mean, this is also good, but we on the left, of course, have a proud history of controversy, also internal controversy, so we do like to argue a lot. But no, I wanted to say, I mean, I do agree with my colleagues very much so, but at the same time, Tobias has already mentioned one thing I think that which is very important, and this is political culture. So I think, I mean, controversy is at the core of democracy, right? I mean, we need to disagree, we need to offer different ideas and approaches and also different answers to the same question. Even if sometimes, as you've mentioned, Mr. Hagemann, the goal is the same as we've experienced, for example, in the German election campaign on climate questions and so on. So there is an agreement on what actually is the goal, but there are different ways on how to get there. But I think what is very important, and I think, I mean, it would be way too much to project like our small cooperation onto like inter-party relations. I wouldn't dare to do that, but I think what's important is to agree on a certain way of communicating and a certain set of rules to work together. So, and this I mean in relation to political culture also. If we see political debates and discussions that are mainly about delegitimizing the other, you know, and not even acknowledging the position of the other, that this is a legitimate position, you know, really in this radical absolute term of really delegitimizing the actual, you know, position of someone as a parliamentarian, as a politician in general, as a minister, or whoever, and not even, you know, accepting to hear a position on a political question. So not showing the respect to actually accepting this as a legitimate contribution to the debate, even if you don't agree, then we have a problem. And I think this is something which makes the difference. So not agreeing on everything. I've talked about the consensus of you know, being in favor of European integration in Germany. I think this is an important consensus, but in general, I wouldn't think, you know, political culture needs to have, you know, consensus on too many things. There needs to be controversy. Also to have, you know, a democracy that engages the citizens and so on. But there needs to be a consensus on the rules of the game and on showing respect to one another, to also acknowledging and seeing the other as a legitimate speaker of a position. So I think this is something much more important even than, you know, finding consensus on certain issues, which is also part, of course, of political dialogue, but it's more a question of respect. It's a question of respecting democratic rules of the game. So, and I'm not talking only about elections, but procedures in parliament and so on. And I think this is something which, I mean, is not necessarily a lesson from our cooperation, but in our cooperation, I think we show quite some respect for the other and also the opinions of the other, especially if they differ from one another. So I think this is an important point.
Thank you very much. I like that you felt the urge to disagree, even though you seem to agree quite a bit also with Dr. Rüttershoff at this point before. But it's of course a very crucial thing to accept the political competitors as such, as competitors, and not see them as enemies, which is actually also a problem many Western democracies face during these times, especially in the age of populism. And for the last round of questions, I would like you to reflect a bit on the role of Germany in this whole process, which is usually seen as very central. So there are usually very high expectations on the role Germany should play in the Western Balkans and, of course, in the Berlin process. So how do you see your contribution as actors from Germany to this forum? And what would you say is the added value of your long-term commitment to this project, maybe also with your German background? And this one would be the first for Dr. Fiesinger.
The contribution of us, I think, becomes crucial and obvious that we are supporting this Tirana Connectivity Forum from the very beginning. I think this shows some close cooperation, some long-term cooperation. This cooperation is based by mutual reliance and commitment. And our crucial task, what we all have, is that we don't be donor. We don't want to behave as teacher. We are simply partners of the local institutions here everywhere, and a special case here. You see it also on the screen. It is written in partnership of the political foundations. And let me also emphasize that it is this commitment is not short-term limited, is long-term oriented. As in former questions already mentioned, we must, of course, ask what is the crucial motivation of this forum? To transpose connectivity in a life in spirit. And each of us has, of course, different partners, different ways, and different ways to transpose. And if I would be asked to give some example by us, then I would emphasize that we, of course, have some very special relation to youth connectivity. 5 years ago, 2017, together with our close partner CDI, we created some some Western Balkan youth cooperation platform. This platform is not in a competition with RICO. This platform is simply additional, and it is, how to say, characterized by some bottom-up approach that youth organizations meet together, find common projects, and elaborate them. And looking for the future, for instance, the aim and the task is now to find also new strategies, new agendas for the next years to elaborate new key areas where we can engage. Of course, in my mind is here also this so-called economic and investment plan, which was yesterday mentioned also in the so-called Birdu declaration. And for instance, here is the question if there is some possibility to find something where the youth can be participated in this. In economic investment plan has or is in relation to 6 sectors with 10 flagships. One of them is, for instance, human capacity and human capital, and here is really to ask if the youth can be involved there. And this I mean not primarily in financial term, I mean it entirely. This is of course some long commitment and we are engaged in, and so I hope this is also then our special added value.
Thank you very much. And this is also, again, an interesting aspect that despite of the cooperation, you still have to focus also on taking different aspects and focusing with your organization on a certain field here and sharing these issues. I think if I remember correctly, the Ebert Stiftung was focusing at this event that Dr. Fiesinger mentioned on energy issues. Maybe Ms. Klapper, can you say something on the question regarding the relevance of you as a German organization here, and probably also if you fill out an issue like this, do you have special links to this issue from a German perspective, like from the German energy policy inspired, for example? What would you say?
I'm actually not sure about this event and the energy question, to be honest. So
don't worry.
Maybe I don't recall, right? No, but yeah, I can just underline, that our approach is one of partners here, and not. I mean, you've mentioned the German position or the German background. Of course, we're aware we're a German organization. At the same time, we also consider ourselves a European organization, and we're doing a lot of work here also in a European spirit. And at the same time, we have this advantage in Germany of this system of political foundations that we can be active in lots of countries in this world and can work together with our partners on different issues. And as has already been mentioned, we have this pluralistic system of the political foundation, so we all focus on different issue areas or focus areas. Of course, there are some similarities, and then we have used our synergies in corporations like this one, but then again, we focus on separate areas also and support partners in these different areas that are important for the society in general. So, for example, we as FVS, work a lot also on youth. I mean, this is also an issue where we share the working area with different aspects that we cover. We work a lot also in political education. But in addition to this, in addition to youth and European integration, we work, for example, on economic policies. We work in support of workers' rights and with trade unions. And we also have a program supporting independent journalism, for example. So we all cover different areas, and this, I think, is the advantage of this, if you want to call it the German system, but the system of political foundations. I think this is a great privilege for us that we can do this as partners here. At the same time, I also believe it's, especially in this region, it's important that organizations like ours are involved and engaged also in the context or in the sense of a European solidarity and working together, because as we've mentioned before, European integration is very important as you speak of the German position, so it's very important for German foreign policy, but also for the political foundations that are independent organizations. So we are not part of the German official foreign policy, even though we're publicly funded. But this is also a good way to support European integration and also to conduct different activities. Also as I mentioned, in the sense of a European solidarity and support different actors of civil society, for example, here. So I'm not so sure if this is a specific, German position, as this question was asked in that way, but I think it is a certain position of responsibility, I think, that we use in partnership here.
Thank you. So not rather the link to Germany, which is here important, but rather the way it is organized in a way Germans organize this field of political organizations and their attached foundations. Dr. Rüttershoff.
Well, let me just add 2 points perhaps, and also with an eye towards the clock, because I think we're already a bit short on time. I think very important things were already said, so there's actually not that much for me to add, but maybe one point in terms of the advantage of political foundations. Because it's actually a quite unique system, I would think, that we have this, attached to a party but not part of the party, publicly funded, but not being influenced by the German government, and really acting around the world. And I believe if we look at Albania, for example, CAS has been in Albania for 12 years, FES has been 30 years. There's a long-standing cooperation and involvement here in the country, and over the time, I think all of our organizations, all the foundations have really established a network in the civil society. That's a very important part, but also with links to either government or the political parties. And if you know Albania or if you know the region, I think it's particularly stark here, but it's probably elsewhere in the world that there's usually, these are two different worlds, right? You have the civil society and then you have the government, and they don't usually touch. And I think for us that's an advantage to really be in both sides and also kind of connect these two worlds. I think that's one important aspect. And the other important aspect is sort of that we're not just a tender or grant awarding organization, but at least that's our approach, that's my approach, to say, okay, yeah, we support you with a project, but we would like to be involved as well, because we have our worldwide network. I think all the foundations have over 300 offices worldwide, and we have experts, whether that's in Brussels, in Berlin, in Germany, or in the region around the world, on specific topics, and we would like to get them involved, and they can probably help you with your project or with the problems you have. And that is really something that we try to encourage and that we're proud of. So maybe these are two points to add to that discussion.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for keeping an eye on the clock, where we are a bit in surplus, because Mr. Fleckenstein was so kind to give us 10 minutes from his panel, but actually we are getting to a close here, and I would like to thank you very much for this discussion. I think it was a very good idea to have this panel, because within the Berlin process and the idea of connectivity, which should be in mutual interest of everybody living in the region, this is some kind of mutual interest realized by different party foundations as an example of how it could be and how it could work to get projects implemented faster and probably be more successful in this regard if there are no policy U-turns or projects interrupted between changes of government, for example, but rather a cross-party consensus on crucial strategic projects that are decided together. And I think the Tirana Connectivity Forum is a very good place to discuss these projects, and I wish you a very successful rest of the conference. I thank you very much again for the discussion, and I hand over to Adrian, who I think is the next chair of the coming panel. Thank you very much, and bye-bye from Thessaloniki to Tirana.
Policies at the German Federal Office. Thank you, Ms. Stohr. We are not very well known in the Balkans, but we know that you are a very important person, at least for Germany. And also Mr. Alexandru Bragonzi, the head of the European Investment Bank Regional Representation for Western Balkans from Belgrade. Dear Alessandro, it's very good to see you. You were in Albania before going to Belgrade. I will immediately start by saying that it's kind of logical. We had the political level at the first panel with Prime Minister Rama talking about his impressions of the summit in Slovenia and mentioning the initiative of the Open Balkans as a kind of follow-up or a PIU, he said, quoting him, for the Berlin process. We had afterwards a very interesting and constructive panel with ministers of infrastructure of three. Unfortunately, the fourth one couldn't join us, about joint projects and joint infrastructure projects in Western Balkans. Personally, I loved it. And finally, we had the three German political foundations talk about what they do on the ground. And it's interesting because now we are talking, we will go into the nitty-gritty, into the practical implications. We will move from the political will to good governance. Or we can move, if I can say it otherwise, from a relationship built on trust and on political affiliations to the contracts. And whenever we say contracts, we say accountability, we say transparency, and in the case of enlargement, we also say conditionality. I will start with Mr. Popovsky. You have let us know that you will not stay until the end, so we'll try to make the best of the time that we have available with you. We have now, during the last times, we have the new enlargement methodology. We have where the fundamentals cluster conditions everything, every progress. We have the economic and investment plan, 9 billion euros in grants and 20 billions in loans. We have the new IPA 3 that went through. Mr. McAllister mentioned it before. So what are the novelties that those three elements bring regarding the accountability and the conditionality principle? How do they improve the relationship, the assistance, the connections between European Union and the Western Balkan States?
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Good to see some familiar faces. Of course, I would prefer to be with you on the ground, but I'll leave it for the next time. Well, by the way, what you see behind me, I'm not sitting in front of the Commission building. It's too cold in Brussels. It's my virtual background. But it's good to be with you, you know, it's interesting timing because we're just meeting one day after the Western Balkan Summit in Brdo, which was an important rendezvous and an important sign of our commitment to enlargement, and it came right 1 week, roughly more. Than 1 week after the Western Balkan tour of President von der Leyen. And the President, when she spoke at the summit and also after the summit at the press conference, said very clearly that we share our common future just like we share a continent. And this commitment doesn't start today. I mean, when we look back at what happened over the last year and a half, almost 2 years with COVID, and how we engaged with the whole region to lend support, both short-term emergency support and mid to long-term structural support to the countries to cope with COVID, to provide vaccines for people, to roll out vaccination programs. We basically treated the Western Balkan countries like they were already members of the European Union because they are so close and so connected with us. Yesterday's summit was a good opportunity also to highlight the big impact of the economic and investment plan. So we presented a package of 600 million for investment projects, which comes on top of the pledge of 500 million from before, announced at the Berlin summit, which brings the total planned allocation for 2021 to 1.1 billion. So it's quite a lot of funding that will be available and that we can use to make progress on the agenda on innovation, research, and education, and of course on the green agenda with the Balkans. So there's quite a lot on our plate. But you asked about the novelties and different instruments and frameworks we operate in and with. I will start with just a few words on the enlargement methodology, the new enlargement methodology that is in place. And it builds on four main principles: more credibility, more predictability, more dynamism, and stronger political steering. Credibility means that the candidates need to deliver on the reforms they promised. And on our side means delivering on our commitment to a merit-based process. That's why really we are bending over backwards to make sure that the intergovernmental conferences with North Macedonia and Albania can take place in December, and also that we can open at least one cluster, negotiating cluster, with Serbia in December too. To help rebuild credibility, the focus of fundamentals is almost self-explanatory. This is the core of real transformation, and the fundamentals cluster will be opened first and closed last. No other clusters will be closed before the interim benchmarks on the fundamentals have been met. Stronger political steer. Given what is at stake, it's time to ensure stronger steering, stronger ownership by member states. Of course, it has its downsides too. If they have any doubts, if they have additional requests, but that's the only way to make progress. And engaging with the candidates at top level through regular summit and ministerial meetings helps in that regard. We want to make the process more dynamic by, among other things, clustering chapters. So we just put them together in a consistent way, and then it would enable us to make progress more quickly and be also faster with regard to alignment to the European key. And then we need more predictability for both sides. And that's key for the sustainability of the process. No, the new methodology will be incorporated into the negotiating frameworks for Albania and North Macedonia, but Montenegro and Serbia have accepted the application of the methodology within their existing negotiating frameworks. And by the way, the first two intergovernmental conferences under this new regime, if you want, took place in June, and I could see the difference. You know, I'm a byproduct and a veteran of enlargement myself. I mean, I attended, I don't know how many intergovernmental conferences in my good old days as a Polish diplomat, and this one was different. I mean, you could see, I mean, it was attended at a relatively high level by the EU member states, it was attended by prime ministers from Serbia and Montenegro, respectively. But you can. It was really a political forum with an exchange with a certain dynamic, which I found very refreshing. Well, the other novelty is IPA 3. It's a bit different from what it was before. It's already up and running, so the instrument was adopted on the 15th of September, but will be applied retroactively as of January 2021. So we have an instrument equipped with more than 14.14 billion euro that will provide assistance to the candidate countries and potential candidates. What is new there is that in case of significant regression or persistent lack of progress by a beneficiary of the instrument, the scope and intensity of our assistance shall be, as we call it, modulated. But modulation can also happen in case progress has resumed. So it cuts both ways. We also have the power as a Commission to suspend financing agreements if partner countries breach obligations, including those related to respect of human rights, democratic principles, and the rule of law. And that's also included in the enlarged methodology. The instrument is also structured in a different way. There are 5 thematic lines connected with the big priorities of the European Union: green transition, digital and economic reforms, investing in people, education, etc. So we no longer have typical classical country envelopes, which doesn't mean that we are not planning for actions at country level, but the structure of the instrument is an innovation in its own right. And we need the IPA instrument, and that brings me to the next subject, to roll out the economic and investment plan for the Balkans, the one that was adopted by the European Commission exactly a year ago. That was the 6th of October 2020, and with the intention to spur the economic recovery of the region and to close the social economic gap between the Western Balkans and the European Union. And this is very promising. Our president was really impressed by what she has seen already, by the projects in the pipeline, but things where we can really make quick progress on we are coming with a substantial investment package. So with 9 billion euro in IPA funding, with which we hope to leverage up to additional 20 billion euro in investment through the new Western Balkans guarantee facility. The plan focus has 9 priority areas implemented through 10 distinct flagship projects. I will not name them, but I'm sure you've read about them. It's the different interconnectors, road, rail, it's gas pipelines, it's green transition projects and digital projects. There is a lot of focus on youth employment as well, and work is already underway in all the priority areas. We really want to make progress as quickly as we can. And at the summit, I heard it today when we were debriefed by our Secretary General, there was a wide acknowledgement of the value added of the economic and investment. This is really something real. Actually, Albanian Prime Minister Rama, when he came to Brussels in spring at the informal lunch that he had with HRBP Borrell and Commissioner Borrell, he said, this is the only real stuff, the economic and investment. I hope there's more real stuff than that, but this I see it also as a sign of recognition.
Mr. Popovsky, if I may interrupt you, because this is exactly what I was going to say. We have the impression that finally, after 30 years of billions of euros of transfers in the Western Balkans, European Union, finally, they are not talking only about how much money they give to the Balkans, but they are talking about concrete projects that they want to do in the Balkans, together with the Balkans. Yeah. And this is an extremely important change in the view of the impact. This is, we all remember this idea. We see images of, I don't know, third-party leaders in capitals of Western Balkans, but not of the EU. However, my question is here. When you move financing from country to projects, how do you make sure that you apply conditionality?
Oh, well, we are, sorry, there is a strange echo. There is, we take accountability seriously because also as a executive branch of the EU, we are accountable to our taxpayers and our political masters, the European Parliament, European Court of Auditors. So first of all, we will make sure that the implementation of fundamental reforms is on track. We also continue dialogue and cooperation on public administration, public financial management. This is a sine qua non. I mean, we need a solid institutional legal framework in place so that things work well. And we need to strengthen, and that's what we are going to do, the accountability systems within public administration. And we raise it at every occasion that this must not be underestimated. We need an accountable administration to work with us. So there is no free riding, and I think the message has come through. So we will support the country's efforts, also working with a number of key partners like OECD, Sigma, or the IMF and the World Bank. And also there is an element of quality control. Even at the conceptual stage of the economic and investment plan, we were very clear with our partner countries that we really want to focus on mature investment projects, not something that is pie in the sky. And what you see in the plan, I mean, it's actually quite real, like the Corridor 10, the railway Corridor 10 in the region. So we can bring the money, but we need solid preparation. And I think this is also an important step change in that kind of engagement.
And this is the next challenge is for the Western Balkan countries to provide you guys with mature projects that can be financed. This is the first challenge, and the second challenge is to keep those projects for the EU, because I mean third actors are kind of snipping in, in the projects that have been, let's say, identified and developed by the EU. However, you mentioned the partners, and I have the pleasure here to propose new partners for the EU, beyond OECD, beyond the World Bank, etc., to also talk about the civil society organizations that have proved to be reliable, specialized, and professional partners. And also what's even more important is to represent this kind of legitimacy that we get, or we do not seem to get somehow, of the Western Balkan 6 citizen. And I will immediately move shortly to Anna Kristinovska, who is our partner from North Macedonia, to talk about Western Balkan citizens and the role of civil society. I mean, how we are supposed to defend, to represent the interests of the citizens when we have institutions that are recognized by the US exposing structural weaknesses?
Thank you very much, Ardian, for this opportunity. My presence here today reflects actually the efforts of not only ESTIMA and CDI, but also over 20 civil society organizations from the region that in the past over 1 year have been advocated for increased and structured inclusion of civil society in the implementation of the connectivity agenda, and now the economic and investment plan is one of the tools to actually implement the connectivity agenda. So we have been working on a number of events, op-eds, and we have also submitted an open letter to the EU institutions detailing the rationale and the mechanisms for our involvement. I would like to start by saying that the issues affecting the implementation of the connectivity agenda are actually the same governance issues belonging in the fundamentals cluster that Mr. Popovsky mentioned, and that these issues the countries are facing in all the other areas. We are talking here about corruption and conflict of interest, weaknesses in public procurements, public finance management, disrespect for the rule of law, lack of transparency, accountability, and the institutional capacity. And these issues lead to project delays. They lead to increased costs, which ultimately are borne by the taxpayers, whether it's in the EU or in the Western Balkans. And they entail also a number of issues related to the project viability, sustainability, and finally utility for the citizens in the Western Balkans. Let me give you a few examples. You are probably all familiar with the highway project in Montenegro, the Bar-Boljare highway, which probably displays all the issues that I mentioned. There were excessive debt levels to the national budget. There was low economic and financial viability, lack of transparency in the selection procedures for contractors and subcontractors, and serious environmental damage to the Tara River, which is a UNESCO protected heritage site. Now there is an ongoing investigation by the Public Prosecutor's Office, which was actually launched as an initiative of environmental activists and civil society organizations. So I think it is very rightful to ask ourselves that maybe if these environmental organizations had been involved from the very beginning in the project, then maybe this damage could have been prevented and avoided. And you may think that this is a Chinese-funded project, so probably the standards were lower. But to be honest, EU-funded projects are not immune to these issues either. And I will bring here several examples from North Macedonia. It is the country I know best, but I'm sure that these issues are recurrent across the region as well. When we talk about the connectivity between North Macedonia and Albania, in the southern part of the countries, the governments have decided to build an electricity interconnector, gas interconnector, highway, and railway. So all the examples of connectivity. And the government of North Macedonia decided to have 4 separate projects implemented by 4 different public institutions and enterprises who apparently did not coordinate very well among themselves. So in the end, we have 4 different lines of connectivity stretching across another UNESCO protected heritage site, which is of vital interest for North Macedonia and its tourism industry. And now, given that UNESCO has given us recommendations and urged us to repair this planning, some of the projects which have been already in a more advanced phase need to be rethought For example, in the case of the railway, we already had technical documentation prepared with EU funding amounting to 7.7 million euros. And now there will be, if there is a new route, a new line, this technical documentation will have to be prepared once again, which will be additional costs. Then you probably heard about the case of Actor. It was actually the last section of Corridor 10 highway crossing through North Macedonia. And there were a number of corruption and money laundering controversies around this project. Finally, there was an OLAF investigation, there was a criminal investigation in Greece, but there was nothing of the like in North Macedonia. And the third example refers to railway, because rail is now, I think, one of the most important aspects of the connectivity agenda. And there was a rail which was funded already in IPA 1, connecting one of the cities in North Macedonia, Bitola, to the Greek border. There were huge delays in the project, but finally, even though it was IPA 1, it was finished in 2019. And so 2 years ago, and for the past 2 years, there has not been one single train crossing this railway and going from North Macedonia to Greece. So here we have a serious sustainability or utility issue. Why are we building railways if, for a number of reasons, we are not going to use them? For none of these examples that I just mentioned, there has been no responsibility assumed, no accountability, and no in-depth analysis in order to draw a lesson. And this is where civil society comes in. Civil society involvement will not automatically lead to a solution to these problems, but it will exert pressure on the government to do better, to overcome the entrenched weaknesses in the institutions, to be more accountable, and finally will provide them with input to come up with better solutions, high-quality solutions, both at the project and at the policy level, which will ultimately benefit the Western Balkan citizens. I will stop here, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Anna. It's not very often that we discuss about those issues, but I'm so happy and so glad that we can bring them in here. And I can also tell you that the problem that you mentioned, according to our research, happen in all the countries of Western Balkan 6. I also want to underline the fact that basically we are for moving the role of the civil society from the watchdog, which has been the traditional bread and butter role, to an active partner. After all, I mean, given that we cannot change the governments every 4 years, now we have the government that lasts forever, we can try to be more active a little bit on the way those government works. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you certainly with more answers, but I want to take the opportunity to move directly to Ms. Stohr. Thank you very much for being with us. And also thank you very much for organizing this Western Balkan Summit in Berlin. It was crucial because in partnership with our German colleagues of ASPA and Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft, we managed for the first time to crystallize a position, a written position of civil societies in the region and submit it to the German government, but also through the German government to the EU partners. And here I will come to the role of the member states. How do you see, Ms. Stohr, with the new enlargement methodology, how do you translate in practice the implications of the, I'm quoting, increased role of the member state?
Yeah, thank you for your warm words concerning the Berlin summit. And of course, the Civil Society Forum and civil society has always been a very important part of the Berlin process and should remain so. I would like to dwell upon three aspects, and I will come to what you said, role of member states in this enhanced conditionality. So I would like to speak about accountability, conditionality, and incentives. Accountability is something that is very important. It has been mentioned by Maciej, it has been mentioned by the previous speaker, and I would just like to recall stress that this has become also more and more important within the European Union. If you see the discussions we were having around the multi-annual financial framework and the so-called conditionality mechanism, which is foreseen, and after some clarifications, hopefully will be applied for the new multi-annual financial framework. This is exactly stressing the importance of free, independent judiciary, and of course also mechanisms that fight corruption for the allocation of EU money within the EU, but of course also outside the EU when we talk about EU money. So I would like to stress that this is nothing that is only applied to the Western Balkans. It's also something which is very important for the EU member states, and where they decided that they will pay a closer look and give more attention to that aspect. Also, not only when it comes to the conditionality mechanism, but also when it comes to the allocation of money in the context of the NGEU, the big reconstruction and resilience instrument, which we gave us, which we decided after the COVID crisis to bring back the economy within the EU on track. There we have very detailed and interesting mechanisms worked out. The Commission has worked them out, milestones, targets, criteria, and there also the issue of anti-corruption, having mechanisms in place to prevent corruption, and independent judiciary to also judge and control these mechanisms are very important. So what I want to say is that maybe more than from the Berlin process, from these mechanisms which the EU gave itself and which the Commission together with the member states has worked out for the allocation of money within the EU and to improve our system even there, we could draw lessons also for the allocations and to fight those problems which have been mentioned and which of course can always happen when we talk about allocation of funds. So we should have, or I would invite also civil society and in the region to take a closer look at this. So this is about accountability. Conditionality, of course, has been strengthened, and I cannot add much to what Maciej has said on that. I think the role of the member states should aim at creating better ownership also of the member states in this. So we could think about targeted missions where, of course, Commission and member states together, some member states together could go to a country and focus on a specific issue in the field of for example, the fundamentals, present a report, and then it would be, on the one hand side, I think that would help member states to form their own opinion, even better. Not each member state has embassies in every country. On the other hand, as I said, this would create also a certain ownership, because sometimes, and that is now sort of criticism towards member states, sometimes it's quite easy to say that it's the Commission that says something, but maybe we have questions, we see it differently. But this is not so well argued and not so well founded on real arguments.
This is, if I may, with your permission, if I just underline this point, because it's extremely interesting. Because I mean, the Commission does its work, does the proposals, and it gives its decision, and afterwards some member state decides either to add more conditions or to block, like in the case of, for example, North Macedonia, to block the process totally. So involving the member states from the very beginning, as you said, it's better because it gets more information, but also creates the ownership. If you may hold on just 1 second, I just want to ask Mr. Popovsky, what does he think about this suggestion? Mr. Popovsky? Or maybe he has left us?
No.
All right, you're here.
Sorry, there's an echo again. You mean the involvement of civil society?
No, joint let's say, teams between Commission and Member States, quoting Ms. Stower, that focuses on specific issues. On the civil society, I'll come back afterwards. What do you think?
I'm losing you. That's a problem.
So sorry, Ms. Stower raised this idea of to reinforce the ownership by the member states and also to increase the information that they receive on specific issues. Joint teams between Commission and certain member states can be created and can focus on special areas.
Look, we basically made it almost institutional, and that was also part of the COVID response a year ago, where we developed this concept of Team Europe initiatives. Of course, it's a global scheme, so we offer to the member states to join forces wherever they so wish. And we just had actually on Monday and Tuesday, we held a meeting with Directors General for Development Cooperation from all member states to discuss exactly the state of play of different Team Europe initiatives. And so it's more in the south or in Africa, but it's possible everywhere. And actually,
can I take your word on it? Because we just realized that Team Europe, it's a great idea. Not everything bad came from COVID. But they do not cover Western Balkans. And to our question, why do they do not cover Western Balkans? They told us that you guys are in charge about it.
Yeah, that's the difference is that IPA is a very specific pre-accession instrument. And the name says it all. That's why I said that the Team Europe is more sort of targeting the more classical development domain. But the logic itself can be extended to the Balkans. I mean, member states have a lot of projects there. And of course, we don't want to act in isolation. We want to draw on the best practices. And I think we can join forces. We can also, we don't need to pool funding into a single pot. But of course, if we join forces, then the impact will be bigger.
Thank you. So, Thank you very much, Ms. Sorry to have interrupted you in your discussion. So we just finished, but it was very interesting. So
no, I actually, if I may, I did not finish. I would like to stress that I did not criticize the Commission and the Commission's work and the Commission's report, but that we think that exactly in the spirit, and it is actually in the methodology, so it's not a new proposal, it is something that has been discussed in the context of the new methodology, that putting also assessment together, of course, sending even stronger messages together constantly on political developments, on conditionality. That is very important. And let me also stress, when it comes to incentives, of course, money is an incentive and should be an incentive, and it is important to put money into the region to solve and to support the region. And there has been a strong signal from the Brdo summit just yesterday. But I also think that taking over the acquis is is supporting a country in modernizing and in meeting the challenges we have ahead. So you might have realized that the Federal Chancellor in her press conference after the Brdo summit mentioned also the Fit for 55 package, the climate, how to fight and how to react to the challenges of climate change, which the EU has given or is about to give itself, and her expectation that, of course, accession countries, candidates, countries that want to accede also have to take over this. This is could, on the one hand side, sound like a new conditionality, but the point is that, of course, there is a lot for the countries to meet the challenges they anyhow have to meet. What I want to say is that being able to take over and being supported to take over the acquis is, of course, we at least believe, is of course something that also supports the country to better meet the challenges ahead and the challenges we are all facing. Let me say a last word on Bulgaria and North Macedonia, not to be misunderstood. I actually believe that this would be, or that this is a very bad example for member states being involved. I did not think about member states trying to bring in their bilateral issues into the accession process, but about a joint support from the institutions and also member states in order to bring countries forward.
Indeed so. We were this morning in panel with the Minister Bojan Maričić, and we were sincerely impressed by their goodwill, commitment, no bad feelings, but yes, they have done all what they have, and we very strongly stay with them. And I was really impressed by what Mr. Popovsky just mentioned at the beginning of his statement when he said that, quoting, we are bending backwards to do whatever they can for Albania and North Macedonia to start to have the first intergovernmental conference. So appreciate it very, very, very much. Just a last short point for a question for Ms. Stor. You mentioned the Chancellor, and here in the region, if you mention the Chancellor, you cannot mention the Berlin process. We like it, we love it. It has been fantastic, even if it has 3 no's, no budget, no institution, no legal framework. And actually there are 4 no's, no consultants. There are no private contractors working for the Berlin process. You will never find any consultant that has in his CV, I consult for the Berlin process, and it's not a bad thing. Are there positive elements from the Berlin process that can be transposed into the economic and investment plan and IPA 3 delivery mechanisms? Shortly.
No, there's the RCC, of course, consulting the Berlin process. So there are a lot of consultants, but not in the sense as you use the word consultants. But of course, there's a structure and there's the RCC, and a lot of substantial input comes from there. I'm not so sure whether we can draw, and I thought I wanted to answer that question in the very beginning when I said I don't think that there are so many issues we can learn or draw from the Berlin process when it comes then to the to funding and how we spend the money and to the allocation of the money foreseen, because the beauty of the Berlin process is that it is an inclusive process, that it is a process where both EU member states and of course the institutions and the Web 6 work together on an equal footing, and where a lot of ownership has come to the region. The Digital Summit and other sort of strengths of what is being discussed in the Berlin process, they are entirely organized and come entirely from the region. So I think it is a different process. It's more a political process and a process where the region comes together and decides on regional integration, and then the EU and the member states supporting that also money-wise. But it's not a process where the issue of conditionality or the allocation of funds as such plays a huge role.
Yes, indeed. And I'm curious to know what will happen with the Berlin process. Maybe it goes under the competence of Ms. von der Leyen, but we will see. I will ask Mr. Gerg, we are very happy to have you here, Peter. A long-time friend of Tirana Connectivity Forum. And, well, you come from Slovenia. Big things happened yesterday, the day before yesterday from Slovenia. On the basis of what they have been discussing until now, political will and good governance, accountability. I mean, are what we're discussing here somewhat in line with what was discussed yesterday in Bordeaux?
Thank you very much, Ardian, for the question, and also thank you very much for invitation. It's good to be back on the circuit, so to say, and to talk to people live. As it happened also yesterday with the EU Western Balkans Summit. When you mentioned that big things happened, I wouldn't say that I would sum up yesterday's results as big things happening, but what I would say is that the results and the declaration allows in the future for the big things to happen. Basically, what the declaration is saying and is stipulating is that enlargement as such, an European perspective, has a future. And I think this is important from the symbolic point of view. It's important from the view of giving hope to the region, to the citizens of the region, and it's also, I think, in pretty much strategic interest of European Union. As I always say, I think enlargement is not a choice, it's a necessity. I think it's a necessity for the Western Balkans, but also for European Union, because in this change geostrategic reality, Europe and Europe's future is very much dependent on its consolidation. I think without being consolidated, Europe and European Union is going to be very, very pressed to play a significant and responsible role in the new geopolitical reality. So in this sense, the summit kind of showed the way. It also showed the way in terms of connectivity agenda, in terms of advancing all the steps in the common regional market agenda, and also giving enough impetus to things as scientific research, youth, and so on and so on. But here I would like to make one point, and I think all the predecessors who already talked, especially Sabine, made a fine point out of it. I think, and this is not something new, I was saying this a lot also in previous years, what we don't have right now in the Western Balkans is this positive pressure on the governments coming from European Union, but also from the civil society in the region, to start implementing clearly not just the necessary reforms in terms of fundamentals, but also big projects, and be it on the side of infrastructure, be it on the side of energy. And now, with the EU Western Balkans Summit, we have a chance to actually put this positive pressure and make good use of these 9 billion euros which are being allocated to the Western Balkans in the next years. For this to happen, we need to ensure everybody, and this is why also I support what Sabine said about putting joint missions of European Commission, member states on the ground as much as possible, because this is something which creates this atmosphere of making something happen. And on the other hand, it's also emboldening civil society in the region to be more of a watchdog or more of a keeper of the benchmarks in order for these projects, which are going to happen in the region in the next years, are going to be transparent, and they are going to be done in line not just with the rule of law and all the other fundamental criteria, but also in line with the green agenda of the European Union and fight against climate change. I think we all realize that it's not, right now we're not just talking about big infrastructure projects, we are talking about projects who are in line with our common fight against climate change, because I think this question, it's going to be one of the biggest questions, not just for Europe or the Western Balkans, but for the world. So, we need to take care of also this aspect, and here I agree with Anna. I think civil society in the Western Balkans can play much more significant role than it was playing until now.
Peter, thank you very much. And this brings me back to Anna just for a little point, because Dusan Relic from Stiftung from Wissenschaft und Politik has published an op-ed saying that for the IPA 3 there will be around 500 euros transfer per capita for the Western Balkan 6, while the countries around will get 10 times more. So it will be a wall that will raise. So we need to be more careful about the way we spend our money. This is the first thing. And second thing is that what we have discussed is also this idea of being local allies of the European Union, because from Brussels or from Berlin or from, I don't know, Copenhagen, it is impossible to know everything what happens here. You may know, you may assess mature dossier, project dossier, when it receives Brussels. But before this dossier happens, many things can happen. For example, if you can, during project identification, this climate issue, the geopolitical implications.
In line with what you said, I would like to point out that civil society in all the countries in the region has been the most progressive and the most pro-EU, I think, part of society. And we have always advocated for respecting the EU values. And one additional advantage that we have is that we are not bound by the 4-year democratic cycle. So we can opt for long-term solutions, unlike political elites who think more in terms of short to mid-term gains. So I think that all these advantages make us somehow an indispensable partner for the EU in the region. And that is why there should be some sort of mechanism that will ensure permanent involvement and not on ad hoc basis for civil society in the connectivity agenda.
It's called moral hazard. We live here, you know, so we don't finish our job and move to other countries. And here I have the pleasure to talk to switch directly to Mr. Bragonzi, because we have discussed, Alessandro, we have discussed about basically what you do every day. You receive applications for projects in infrastructure, in different sectors of infrastructure. You assess them. You assess also the solidity of the appliers through your compliance functions, which the EIB, I think it's top of the notch with what we know. But would like to know some hands-on experience about what are the real challenges when you work on the ground for the biggest financing institution involved in Western Balkans.
Yes, Arden, hope you can hear me well. Please confirm. Thanks, great. So thanks again for inviting me again to the Tirana Connectivity Forum. It's a pleasure to see Tirana from here, from Belgrade, and I'll be there next week. So I'll be very happy to see you in person if I can. Regarding your question, I mean, I was very fascinated by the discussion and on the policy level on the enlargement strategy. Of course, let me just make a quick introduction of the European Investment Bank for those who don't know what we are and what we do, and then do a very deep dive into how we operate on the ground. And with the caveat and the important disclaimer that we are a project-based bank. As you said, we deal with projects on the ground and the application mostly from the public sector and the local governments. So as a matter or by means of an introduction, so the European Investment Bank is what we call the Bank of the European Union, simply because we are owned by the 27 member states. And our operations are mostly in the European Union, or let's say 90% of our activity goes into the European Union across different sectors. For what concerns outside the EU and the Western Balkans, let's say that in Western Balkans we have been active now for more than 40 years, working across different sectors, but mostly and predominantly on the transport infrastructure projects. Last year, we have signed 873 million between loans and investment grants. And since 2009, to give you an order of magnitude, our financing to project reached close to 10 billion euros in the region, making us one of the key financiers of the region alongside other international financial institutions. Of course, the EIB activity goes hand in hand with the strategy of the European Union for the region. And the mission of the European Investment Bank is to foster the sustainable growth within the EU and abroad. And we are committed to this sustainable development, and this is a foundation of our business model. So at risk of repeating things that have been said by the previous panelists, but allow me to set the scene. So now we are working as a bank, as a financier, in the context of the Economic Investment Plan. The Economic Investment Plan is a blueprint for sustainable development of the region. We talk about the amount available of IPA grants and the potential leverage of additional loans, which will come from either us or other financial institutions. Let me say that this is a clear confirmation of the European Union's key role as principal partner of the region. And thanks to this plan, we will have European Union norms and standards that will be embedded into the projects, in infrastructure projects mostly, but not only, that will happen in the region in the coming years. So one of the key objectives is to make this process transparent, including through procurement requirements, environmental and social requirements that are in line with the European standards, European Union standards. And it's important, as we said before, and we mentioned about accountability and the governance, that countries that present this project to us and to the European Union first are aware of these needs and requirements for the project and identify projects that are mature and of good quality. The acting Director General of Ligonier mentioned already to you the so-called approach of Team Europe. The Team Europe approach, which EIB belongs, is an approach that entails close cooperation of financiers such as us, EBRD, World Bank, AFW, FD, all of the international financial institutions, and the Commission to support the aligned EU initiatives, including the green agenda that we mentioned before, the digital agenda, the smart and sustainable mobility strategy, as well as the new innovation agenda that was presented yesterday during the summit, to ensure that there will be convergence from all EU standards. The EIB will operate into this paradigm through provision of course, financing that comes from our AAA financial standings that allow us to raise funds in the market and invest them into economically sustainable projects, also thanks to the EU guarantee. And also allows us to bring along expertise and technical assistance services to governments and to local partners, so that the project preparation and implementation, as well as the monitoring, is in line with EU requirements. Just to give you maybe a few examples of recent projects within the economic investment plans that are covered by this paradigm, we can mention, for example, the railway corridor stand that was mentioned by the acting Director General of Ligonier, linking Belgrade possibly down to Skopje in the near future, the modernization and electrification of the Niš-Dimitrovgrad railway line, so connecting Serbia to Bulgaria, the wastewater treatment plant in Skopje, or the rail route 4 in Montenegro, just to mention a few of them. And it is within this area of investment that we operate, and it is within this area of investment that we can provide a value added. How do we provide the value added? Through two forms of governance and tools and mechanisms. On the EIB side internally, we have a set of tools to ensure that projects we finance are in line with the economic sustainability concept and the fact that they bring along benefits for the society as a whole. They are not only financially sustainable. Actually, on the contrary, if they were fully financially sustainable, they will not need support from institutions such as the EIB, because there will be the market that will be able to support. So we really need to look into the complexity of this project from an economic appraisal perspective, and looking at the externality of these projects. So from a human, technological, natural standpoint, also, because we mentioned before the Green Agenda, taking into account the shadow cost of carbon that is implied in the new methodology to assess these projects. This is one element of...
Alexander, if I may just interrupt you, please bear with me, but this is the problem that Anna just mentioned and that Peter delineated a little bit, because, I mean, I understand that the countries identify and prepare the projects, and they should be in line with the EU requirements. On the other side, in the country reports of the European Commission, it is clearly written black and white that those countries, our countries, have structural weaknesses, and they are captured, and we receive tens of millions of euros in technical assistance because our institutions are incompetent or inept, and in many cases they are corrupt. So, I mean, basically a dossier, a mature dossier that comes from those institutions, I mean, it puts you in a difficult position, doesn't it? I mean, because it may be very well prepared, and sometimes they are not even prepared by the institutions. Very often they are prepared from special interests. You know, they are the result of the lobbying of special interests, and even prepared outside the institutions. I mean, and this is the whole thing that we are discussing in here. I mean, how to go even in the process of identification and preparation.
Let me say, Arden, I mean, of course, it's not an easy task. Of course, the issues that you mentioned before are present. There are other issues, if you want, in terms of what we receive. Most of the time, we receive things that lacks a strategic approach. That there is...
they are not part of an SPP, for example.
Pardon?
They are not part of the national priority list. I mean, projects out of nowhere, or projects that change destination in the middle. There are plenty of examples.
Not only that, we also have situations where there are changing priorities along the way, reverse decision. We ended up in this kind of situation. But I mean, this is also part of the project of assessing and reviewing project that we receive. Probably is also the reason why by certain members of the Western Balkans, we are accused of certain excessive conservatism and prudence that led to lengthy approval process. But indeed, we need to understand where these projects come from, what is the functionality of this project. As you say, sometimes the agenda of those who presented to us are not in line with the one of the strategic approach of the plans of the country. This is part of our assessment. Whenever we are receiving this project, we carry out such type of assessment and we enter into discussion and debate with the promoters. However, I mean, we talk about accountability. We cannot replace the countries in this decision-making process. It's a demand. I mean, the whole EIP is a bottom-up process where the country itself identifies the priority and presents to us. So what we can do is help them to prepare them better, to identify the weaknesses, to reinforce where needed, to identify areas that are probably overlooked, and reinforce those structural weaknesses that you identified. But it remains clear, the countries remain clearly accountable for the project they prepare. And if they are not able to do so, I can tell you by experience that certain mechanisms that are in place, including through the Western Balkans investment frameworks, allows to stop this project to go ahead, to not receive funding. Please do not think that every project that is submitted to us or to the European Commission or other IFIs through the WBAS is automatically passing the screening and will be therefore receiving millions of euros from taxpayers, wherever they come from. There is a scrutiny of this project, there is an analysis, and there is huge work made to support this project, to make them strategically important and implementable and viable.
Absolutely, but the other side, if we go on the other side, I think that you also should be, let's say, on your watch, because sometimes very good and nice and mature projects identified and developed and prepared and matured by the European Union have been, let's say, snatched, I don't know what's the word, but I mean have been, let's say, shifted during the financing time to third parties, and we have very recent examples, for example. So, I mean, my idea is not only, I mean, if only to explain a little bit better our approach. Our approach is that your best allies, as Anna said, the best allies and the unwavering support that comes from the Western Balkans come from the citizen and from the civil society. It's easier for us to be, so to say, a bit nasty with you and more provocative with you, because you allow us, you give us space. I mean, we have Peter here, we have Ms. Storr, we have Mr. Popovsky. This is the place where we're going to raise our voice. But by raising our voice, we also want to say that, guys, we are here to help you, because we're helping you not because we love you more, actually we love you more, but because we love ourselves first, and we will live here. So basically what we are trying to say is that there are other actors, there are other instruments, there are additional and innovative ways to make this. We will have 9 billion euros in grants from the EU. It's not a lot. We just said, compared with what our neighbors receive, it's nothing. It will, in dynamics, it will increase the difference in growth. But what we can make of the sort that this money is well spent, and also that the interests of the European Union are protected. Because they are aligned with our own interests, with the interests of the citizen, not with the interests of the elites. And here I will come to Peter. Peter, you mentioned, thank you very much, Alessandro. I'll come back with another question. Peter, you mentioned positive pressure from governments to start implementing clearly big projects, and here you mentioned the role of civil society. What can we do to help you carry on with this idea? I mean, you have the presidency, Slovenia has the presidency of the EU until the end of the year. What can we do? Where can we scream? Where can we protest? I don't know, send nice letters, repeat them, resend them. Convince, trying to convince.
No, I think you already sent a nice letter to member states and European institutions, so I think we are all aware of the issue and the problem. Now we have to talk among ourselves, and we need to, gather, again, we are going to come back to political will, but also not just political will, but some sort of resolution on how to more involve civil society in these big connectivity projects. Because I think at the end of the day, these projects are for the citizens, by the citizens. So in this sense, you need an oversight, not coming just from European Union or European Investment Bank. I fully agree. I think here we have all the mechanisms and instruments in place, but it needs to come also from the region itself. So in this sense, I hope that in the next years or even sooner, the civil society is going to be much more engaged as it is now. Because as we saw, and Anna showed us some examples, there is much work to be done.
Thank you very much, Peter. Ms. Storr, the Berlin process has been a boon to us, to the civil society in the Balkans. We have been able to gather regularly, at least once a year, during on the fringe of the Western Balkan Summit. We have been able to organize, to know better our partners, and to kind of also value or make visible our expertise. So in short, we have got a super boost by the Berlin process. I also would like to mention the last visit of Chancellor Merkel in the Western Balkans, where the first group that she mentioned were representatives of the civil society, and this is a very high valuation for us. So, I mean, this boost that we got under the Berlin process, can it be transposed somehow into the economic and investment plan? this spirit. For the moment, we don't have any clear idea about the mechanisms or how it will be, but I mean, can we build on the positive side of it?
Yeah, no, of course, and I can only underline what Peter has said, and others, of course, also about the importance and the important role civil society is playing also in monitoring, for example, the allocation of funds, the use of funds, whether a project makes sense or not, whether it is detrimental maybe to the interests of local societies, local communities, whether it involves the correct ecological standards. I mean, all those are classical civil society issues, including also the fight against corruption and the monitoring of governments and of civil servants in this field. So, of course, I mean, our hope is and our expectation is that the vivid civil society which we have and which you have in your countries can even more contribute to the assessments, to the public discussion, to the debates on projects, and not only how they are being proposed, how they are being planned, if they make sense from the point of view of the societies, but also in the implementation of those projects. So, I mean, we would hope very much that this actually will continue and maybe even be strengthened. If you allow me, while I have, because you gave me the word, I would like to give a short comment on what you mentioned twice, the fact that, of course, the money that is being spent for EU member states is significantly higher than for accession countries. And you mentioned Dusan Relic, who always points out that the gap actually is widening and not closing, and that this makes accession in the end maybe even more difficult. I would like to recall that the new methodology also includes the aspect of phasing into certain policies. And the idea is always being discussed that this could also mean phasing into certain funds. I have to be honest, and therefore I will say that we have not found a solution how to do that. So there are discussions ongoing, and it is not so easy, but at least the idea is getting more and more discussed and could be a real possibility. But I would say that if each and every country in the Western Balkans could somehow make their own calculation, for example, what they would have gotten from 750 billion NGEU pot from that fund, if they had been or if they were already at the moment members of the European Union. And that should be a huge incentive to be quicker, to comply with reforms and to work more on internal reforms to get closer to the European Union, exactly to be able to profit from those funds as early as possible. So, I mean, it has two sides. I agree that if you look at it, you can always say we need more money, but at the same time, I think everyone around the virtual table also agreed that it is about how the money is being used, both how much the projects make really sense, are positive for the economy and for the people, but also, of course, how the money is being administered and spent. And in all those fields, of course, a lot of progress has to be made. And coming back to your question, yes, we believe that civil society should continue to play a role and should play an increased role in this field. And we are happy that the Commission in its reports, of course, is also listening to civil society, and we are encouraging the governments also to install mechanisms, consulting mechanisms with civil society.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's in the EPA regulation that was mentioned by Mr. Popovsky that just passed in September. It's mentioned clearly the inclusive partnership, which I quote, CSOs are duly consulted and have timely access to relevant information, allowing them to play a meaningful role during the design, which is extremely important, design from the beginning, implementation, and associated monitoring process of programs and projects. And I want to believe that the projects, when we talk about projects, we talk also about flagship projects. And talking about the money, I mean, for the moment, we are not asking for money. We need the money because to be able to provide expertise and to build expertise and to provide informed assessment, there are costs. For the moment, what we ask is for some place around the table, for more information. We want to know about the projects that are being proposed to you. We want to know why those projects and no others. We want to know how they are assessed. Because at the end of the day, we both win. When you win, we win. And when we are better, when we feel better, you also win. So the ones that lose are not here in this room and for the moment. So, but of course, the elites and what we call the capture of the states. Going back to Mr. Bragonzi, I would just ask a very hypothetical question. The European Bank of Investment is it's one of main actors in the Western Balkans investment framework. How do you apply the conditionality principle in the project financing when you are in WBIF? I mean, for example, how some non-compliance or non-alignment with the EU foreign policy, for example, can affect the financing of an infrastructure project. I mean, or can it happen, or is it foreseen? Alessandro?
Yes, Arjen. So in terms of, I mean, as you said, we are a key partner in this WBIF mechanism. Maybe it's worth to mention how the functioning of this instrument is for those who are not familiar with it. So it's a framework that allows beneficiaries to receive both technical assistance support and investment grants for reducing the financial burden on the project. In terms of how these projects are presented, those projects are screened against a number of conditions, which refers indeed to standards for European Union investments and take into account the requirements of the EU. So maybe the foreign policy aspect is a bit beyond the scope
I pushed it a bit on purpose. It's 5 o'clock after all, and we have started at 9 o'clock this morning.
but definitely, either through the preliminary screening or in any case as part of the internal process of EIB financing, key aspects of EU financing are analyzed and reviewed by the EIB. We can mention, these are the typical aspects that we look at, are definitely the transparent and non-discriminatory features of the procurement process, which is of utmost importance for us. And please also, regarding accountability, we are not replacing countries or promoters in managing the procurements. They remain the sole responsible for the procurement. But what we do is that we help them, we provide advice, we assist them to ensure that procurement is made according to these overarching principles that lies with EU financial support. On top of that, we require them that complaints mechanisms are put in place by the beneficiary country as regards, for example, the outcome of this selection process or tenders. And we ensure that stakeholder consultation applies throughout the preparation of the project. we carry out environmental and social assessment and review the quality of the projects along this line in line with EU directives. So there is a number of phases in our project assessment that takes into account the conditionality of the EU assistance. I hope this answers your question.
No, it's perfect. I pushed it a little bit because the methodological question that we have in our mind during our research is now that the economic and investment plan, let's say, biggest part of 30 billion euros goes through WBIF, the idea is how WBIF governance structure can be adapted to reflect conditionality and accountability that before was applied in different forms because we had the country envelopes, etc., etc. So we are fully aware this is a work in progress. And yes, you want to intervene? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Just maybe adding one just comment on this. WBIF is part of the framework on the IPA assistance, and therefore builds upon systems that exist even before WBIF receives the project. You mentioned before, National Single Project Pipeline, National Investment Committee. So even before the projects arrive to the WBIF, there should be an engagement with civil society and other institutions to discuss on this project, in my opinion.
In the best of cases, I mean, according to the book, yes. But according to reality, and this is what we are discussing now, I mean, how to overcome these issues. We are reaching little by little the end of our panel, and I know that Peter was so nice as to come here. I mean, it's a great pleasure that you're here. You have to leave right now. You have to travel through the mountains. And it's better if you do it during the daylight. So by thanking you for your presence here, I would give you the floor for your personal concluding remarks, and afterwards we will make a tour with the concluding remarks with the panelists, and we will close the panel. Peter.
Thank you very much, Ardian. Now I'm going to be very short. I think your title of the conference says it all. Building better Balkans together. If we have all the same goal, meaning the partners in the European Union, meaning the governments in the Western Balkans, meaning the civil society in the region, then it shouldn't be difficult. But we all know that theoretically all the things are easy, but when you put them in practice, there is so much of different interests, so much of bilateral stories, so much of different issues in different countries that building better together sounds nice, but it's going to need a lot of efforts. It's going to need continued activity and continued pressure, I would say, especially from European Union, who has this oversight over the region, to pull it together. So as I said at the beginning, I think after the summit, some things in the enlargement process are clearer. Some things in terms of relations between the EU and the Western Balkans are clearer, and now we have to use this momentum to actually start building some of the things, be it in terms of connectivity, be it in terms of the enlargement story. I think one thing which is of paramount importance, and we touched it just a little bit, it's of course start of negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia. I think this has to happen as soon as possible, preferably, I would say, before the end of Slovenian presidency. And we are all, as also Maciej said, and Sabine, we are all working very hard towards this goal. So thank you very much again for the invitation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And yes, you can go and have a safe trip. Mr. Bragonzi, what would be your after this discussion, very interesting discussion and exchanges, what would be your intermediate concluding remarks? Because I guess we will have time for coffee next time when you come to Tirana, next Tuesday.
Indeed, Arjen. I will be super brief. I think we touch upon the main topics. I was very interested because the discussion started from a very important strategic and policy angle, and the change in the enlargement methodology, but also we did a deep dive into concrete project assessment and project governance, and I fully agree with you on making the focus on accountability and governance model that should help the implementation of the economic investment plan, and we are there to support all the key stakeholders and continuing the dialogue with all partners. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. Ms. Stohr, Germany is the biggest country in the European Union and one of the champions of the enlargement, and very, very present here through the economy, through finance, through political monitoring. After this debate, which I think goes out a little bit of the usual debates, and after listening to our points, what would be your, let's say, also intermediate, let's call it, we would like to have you here in Tirana whenever you can, your intermediate conclusions.
Oh, thank you very much. I would like to stress that I believe that with the reconfirmation of the political will from Bordeaux, and also with the new methodology and with the investment plan, we have all the instruments in principle on the table, and if we make best use of them, then we will be able to make a difference both in concrete projects in connectivity, which of course is very, very important, but also when it comes to the issues of structural reforms, of good governance, anti-corruption, which is both a precondition for allocating the funds, but of course also precondition for a good development and good future of your countries. And if I took away something positive in addition from the discussions in the Bordeaux during the summit, the EU Western Balkans summit, then it is that the discussion and the arguments, the geopolitical arguments, and those who underline the geopolitical importance of the region, in addition to all the other issues that are there and remain there, those have become even more, and this narrative or these arguments have become even stronger. So I think that should help both from the side of the EU to apply the instruments which we have duly, so that they can really work. And of course, that should also be an additional motivation for the governments in the region, because I think the world doesn't wait for us if we are not able to solve our problems and our common problems. But again, I think we have all the instruments at hand, and we are happy also from the German side to continue to work on that. And I think I'm stating the obvious, that we had general elections and we will have a new government, at least we will certainly have a new chancellor, but all the parties that are now eligible to form a government due to their results and might form a government, I think they don't differ in their approach to the region, to the Western Balkans region. So the commitment of Germany for the region will certainly remain high. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So Anna, just perfect transition from Ms. Stohr. We have all the instruments. You mentioned us. The world is not waiting for us, and I will accept this as only as you and us together, So basically as a team. And in this us, we need to also be individuated as civil society actors. How we can help improve, how we can help make more efficient this new instrument and this new community that was just mentioned by the previous interlocutors.
Thank you, Ardian. I'm very happy to see that we managed to somehow reach a consensus on all the WH questions. So we know what needs to be done, we know why it needs to be done, who needs to do it. So it is up to the national authorities to include civil society. But I think that the support from the European Union and the insistence for the national authorities to do that would be crucial, because we will not be able to do that on our own. Now, about the aspect of how to do it. I think that the European Union, when was introducing the IPA II mechanism, so the 2014-2020 pre-accession assistance, and that coincided largely with the launch of the Berlin process, established the formal structures for CSO involvement. So we have the sector-based approach, which replaced the project-based approach. We created sector working groups where national authorities were supposed to have this dialogue with civil society on both policy and project aspects. And we have the national investment committees where especially the connectivity agenda and the infrastructure projects were going to be discussed. Now, when it comes to IPA 3, national authorities need to fill in this form with substance. So we have all the formal mechanisms. Now we need to ensure that there are representative and competent civil society organizations who will act in partnership with the national authorities within these established structures. And that will allow us to be proactive and to exert this positive pressure that we mentioned, as opposed to being reactive and reacting only when there is an issue. And I think that one buzzword here should be trust. That will help us to establish mutual trust and to promote the vision that we, all the three sides, the European Union and its member states, national authorities and civil society, work for the same goal, and that is ultimately the well-being of the citizens of the Western Balkans.
Thank you, and I will not add any other word to this as a conclusion of our panel. Thank you very much, Ms. Stohr, Mr. Bragonzi, Mr. Gerg, Mr. Popovsky, Anna. Thank you very much. It was an honor and a privilege to moderate this panel. I hope we will have other opportunities like this. I wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. Thank you. Connectivity Forum, and as per program I have to make also the conclusions, and it's impossible to make the conclusions of such a charged day, but I will just mention some of the notes that I have taken, and if only to see a little bit to explain what's the overall red line or fil rouge that has gone through this Tirana Connectivity Forum edition. First, we started in the morning with a side event on the justice reform and enlargement in Southeast Europe 6. It is very important for us to talk about justice reform, not only because the rule of law is part of cluster of the fundamentals and it conditions all the chapters, but also without rule of laws you cannot have good and successful infrastructure projects. And in connectivity agenda we talk about projects. It was a very good and excellent event where we had Minister Manja from Albania, Minister Hagiu from Kosovo, and Minister Marici from North Macedonia, moderated by Mr. Hilion, Professor Hilion, when they talked about the experience of justice reform in Albania and what can be taken and used from our good neighbors around in their own efforts of justice reform. Some very interesting mechanisms came here, and I learned, for example, that in North Macedonia, they will use filtering and not vetting, what we did in Albania, for example. But there will be in the minutes, there will be much more information. And for those that have followed it and want to follow it, it will be also posted in our YouTube channel. This was followed by a very good, I would say even excellent panel with Albanian specialists of justice reform, where they talk and presented a report or analysis of the good governance aspect of the new justice reform institutions in Albania, analyzed like never before. It is the first time that it has been done. They were analyzed on the way they function, on the way they manage their human resources, on the way they manage their finances, and on the internal procedure. A very interesting report will be published in the coming days. The afternoon session started with a keynote address by the Prime Minister Edi Rama, who came himself here in physical. Grateful to him for his time in this such a very busy political time. He talked about his takeaways of Bordeaux summit and how this how European Union at the end of the day should come up and should stick to their promises and come up with a decision about the opening of negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia as well. He mentioned the Open Balkans initiative, of course, as inspired by the Berlin process. He mentioned, and I'm quoting him, the Open Balkans, it's a sign of ownership of the Berlin process from the region, and as a mechanism of a project implementation unit, he quoted it, PIU, of the Berlin process. And this is a systemic continuation of the objectives of the Berlin process. Also, he mentioned some very important corridors that are being developed in Albania, connectivity corridors with the neighbors. Immediately after, we had a great panel. It was not easy to organize it, but it was worth every second, every mail, every WhatsApp, every Viber message that we have sent, every phone call, early in the morning or late in the evening, with Mr. Tomislav Momirovic, Mr. Mladen Bojanic that contacted us from far away, Mr. Libor Naliu, David McAllister, Romana Blaudin, moderated by Mr. Knut Fleckenstein. Each representative of the countries discussed about connectivity projects that they are developing, how they are progressing, what problems they are, how each country sees the philosophy of developing infrastructure, and where they can meet, and not always in the border, but also working on joint projects. And this was extremely important. Ambassador Vlahutin put the connectivity in the Western Balkans at a larger context as well, given that she covers as well the connectivity between Europe and Asia. Very interesting panel was organized with the German Political Foundation, moderated by Mr. Christian Hagemann from Südosteuropa Gesellschaft, where we had the opportunity to have a quick view on the way the German political foundations work and how they can cooperate in this unique endeavor, which is Tirana Connectivity Forum. To my knowledge, this is one of the only events, regular events, where where those foundations cooperate, and we want this to stay like this. And we finished with this panel. Quite dynamic, I would say, isn't it, Anna? We had the chance to have Minister Popowski, Ms. Stor, Mr. Bragonzi, Anna and Peter Gerg to discuss about how we can build a better Balkans together. And when we mean together, it's not only the actors, the state actors, or the European Union or the banks, but also together inside the society, connecting the citizen with the policy making, making decision makers, local decision makers more accountable, making the whole process more transparent, and at the end more efficient. If 9 billion euros will be money that comes in form of grants from European Union, 20 millions will be loans, which will be sovereign loans guaranteed by our taxes, by Western Balkan taxes. So we have the right to know how they will be spent. I will stop here with the conclusions. I am within the time limit given to us by the big organizers. And we expect to meet you tomorrow morning with, guess with what? What we do in the morning in the Balkans, at least in Albania, we have coffee. So at 10 o'clock, I will have a morning talk and a coffee, virtual coffee, with Georgi Godev from Euractiv. He has been following the forum from far, so we'll discuss a little bit what happened today. Afterwards, at 10:30, we will have Her Excellency Olta Jajka, the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, address the forum. At 10:40, we will have a panel on human capital in post-COVID maritime transport. Albania is a maritime country. We love our sea. We want you all to come and visit us and have a good time. But also we want to use the sea as an instrument for our development. And here the most important is human resources. And we will finish in a panel about the future, or better, about the present, about youth. Youth is not the future, youth is the present of this country and of the region. We will have the honor to have with us the Director of the College of Europe, Ms. Federica Mogherini, who is also former High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission. She will address us from Bruges, from the College of Europe. To be followed immediately after with a very interesting discussion with Her Excellency Jagoda Shapaska, Minister of Labour and Social Policy in North Macedonia, Albert Hani, RICO Secretary General, Dafina Peci, Secretary General of National Youth Congress of Albania, and one of the main organizers of Tirana Youth Capital for next year, and Nedim Alibegovic, Secretary General of Youth Council of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, all moderated by Gresa Smolica from Western Balkans Youth Cooperation Platform, Western Balkans Youth Cooperation Platform. It's a grassroots platform of the 6 biggest youth organizations all over the Balkans. And what they will discuss? Basically, they want to know what's in for youth in the economic and investment plan. So, the questioning time is not over for tonight. There will be plenty of tomorrow. Have a great evening, stay safe, and see you tomorrow. Bye.